Now, he wasn't so certain. But even for Varian, such a feat was difficult. Regardless of how fast he progressed, he hit bottlenecks every now and then. But for him to reach his target, he'd either not reach any bottleneck or break it as quickly as possible. Since the former wasn't under his control, he decided to ensure a perfect breakthrough of all bottlenecks. But how? Varian thought back to all his bottlenecks and observed a common point. He was stuck only because he overused a way of progressing that he couldn't learn anything new to progress. Secondly, when he was at the peak of any level, advancing also took time since he wasn't sure how to advance. For instance, to go from level 3 to level 4 in the space path, he needed to do the reverse of space binding, the unbinding, weakening or loosening the space as opposed to freezing it. He achieved it only through a lot of trial and error. So, the one-stop solution to everything was a teacher. They would help him with bottlenecks and also in advance. So, he needed a water awakener of at least level 5 or level 6. But that awakener must be someone he could absolutely trust. Because not only would he show that he was going to awaken in a new path, but most importantly, his mind-boggling progress speed. And that someone happened to be, Idiot. 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 Varian helplessly smiled as Sarah softly punched him in the chest. Slowly, he wrapped his arms around her waist and breathed in her scent. Sarah's punches slowed down and finally, she rested her head on his chest while hugging him a bit too tightly. "You still remember me?" She raised her head and asked with a grudging face. "Ahaha." Varian laughed awkwardly and tried to think of a response. He hadn't contacted her since Valos began. "Master did miss you a couple of times." Boo came to the rescue. Varian gave the little ghost a silent thumbs up and nodded with a serious face. "I missed you a lot." Sarah narrowed her eyes in doubt as her gaze altered between Varian and Boo. Meanwhile, the ghost ship lightly shook as it soared into the clouds from the Defense Academy. Varian looked at the shrinking academy while his brain continued to think of an explanation that could satisfy her. "Really?" Sarah asked after a while. "Really?" Varian nodded. "Really?" Boo added. "While we were at Valos, Master even thought of buying you a gift." Varian was about to nod when he suddenly flinched. "Thought of?" Sarah raised a brow and smiled cutely. "So, didn't he buy, why?" That gift Varian felt like a broken radio. "Master said shopping would take too long, so he went back to training." Bang! Varian's heart nearly stopped as he felt the warm body in his embrace cool down like an ice cube. Gulp. He lowered his gaze lightly to see Sarah gazing at him with an indifferent face. "Damn it. Boo, during that time, I was anxious every day about the war. How do you expect me to shop, eh?" Boo simply went back to driving while it kept an eye on them. Presumably, it was waiting to throw Varian under the bus. Sarah left his embrace and took a few steps back. Folding her arms, she said, "I have a question, please answer me honestly." Varian took a deep look at her. Today, Sarah was in a black top and blue shorts. With the ponytail adding to her liveliness, when he first picked her up at the academy, she looked like an energetic, beautiful young girl. Now, with spread-out hair that flowed down her shoulders and sharp eyes, she looked more mature. Varian was distracted for a moment but managed to nod. "Did you come to meet me because you missed me or?" Sarah's words trailed off, but her gaze was fixed on him. "Fuck." Varian cursed inwardly and was about to answer when a cute voice destroyed the chance. "Master hopes you can help him train in Water Path." Boom. Humph. Sarah stomped and walked away. Boo guided her to a room that they had recently built. Varian silently scratched his head. Wait, why did it come to this? Then he saw Boo cheerfully humming a tune as it operated the ghost ship to a nearby water dungeon. Veins popped up in Varian's forehead and he decided he'd let Boo sit through horror movies until it begged him to stop. Boo. Sarah's exclamation cut him off. Varian heard the surprise in her voice and quickly teleported to her room. Sarah was inspecting a white bed. It looked perfectly fine, but Sarah's nose was wrinkled and she seemed to be smelling. "This is Enigma's room." Varian facepalmed inwardly and glanced at Boo. Boo looked back at him with a cute and innocent expression that said, "It's not intentional, I swear." "Swear your ass." "This is definitely intentional." Varian clenched his fists. "Enigma?" Sarah asked, with her face facing the ground. It was obvious. The fact that Dreamer was helping Enigma was all over the news after all. Sarah clenched her fist and asked in a low voice, "How is she?" "Huh?" Varian raised a brow in surprise. I don't think what was done is correct. A lot of cadets in our military faction and in the academy, in general, witnessed Shadow Guardians helping others." Sarah said with a frustrated expression. "She's safe. Don't worry." Varian said lightly, and seeing Sarah breathe a sigh of relief, he added, "Her problem would be solved, soon." Sarah raised her head and looked at him. Her eyes were slightly red. "And for her, you're going to risk your life, am I right?" Until now, Varian had a teleportation formation that could get him out of any dangerous situation. But that was useless in front of a sovereign. He snapped his fingers and a couch appeared behind them. Gently sitting her down, he answered, "There is a certain risk, yes. But mostly, I'll be all right." "Mostly?" Sarah smiled bitterly and turned her head away. An awkward silence filled the room. Finally, Varian leaned down and said, "Hey." Sarah was facing the other side and mumbled, "What?" "I really missed you." Varian hugged her softy body from behind and whispered in her ear, "You know what happened in Valos? I was really invested in there, trying to stop what seemed like another human abyss war." "You what?" Sarah turned around with a yelp and she stiffened. She was still in her embrace, and because she turned around, their faces were dangerously close to each other. "Just a bit more, Anne." "I sort of spoiled the Abyssal's plan," Varian said with a serious expression, not minding their distance. "How?" Sarah asked in genuine confusion, forgetting their proximity either consciously or unconsciously. Except for the sovereigns, no one knew that Dreamer was the one who provided the critical information. Even the top military officials only learned that the conspiracy was discovered by a special agent. There was no information at all about Dreamer. Naturally, Sarah too was in the dark. She knew he joined Shadow Guardians and went to Valos. After Evander told her that war was looming, she was initially worried. But since he had ghost ship, she believed he'd be all right. But that didn't mean she thought he did such crazy stuff. "I bombed the secret realms and killed Prince Abrax." "Oh, and that is the same guy who tried to assassinate me when we went shopping." When he uttered the word shopping, sweat poured down Varian's forehead. Thankfully, Sarah wasn't holding on to it anymore. Not after knowing that Varian was neck-deep in Valos' crisis. "Ha," she sighed deeply. "I don't know what to feel." "Feel proud, I guess?" Varian whispered in her ear. Feeling his hot breath, Sarah blushed and glared at him. "Why you?" Varian saw her red face and thought it was too cute. He caressed her face lightly, causing Sarah to stiffen. "I wish things just get better by themselves," he said in a soft tone. "Yeah." Sarah closed her eyes and enjoyed his soft caress. His warm hand moved from her cheek to her hair, and as he lightly patted her, her smile deepened. "But I have to do things that only I can." "Yeah," Sarah nodded involuntarily. "And now, I really need your help." "I can't do it without you, so will you help?" "Yeah," Sarah muttered before suddenly opening her eyes. "Why you?" "Using this to cajole me." "You liar." She accused him in a weak voice. Varian chuckled. "When I said I missed you, it wasn't a lie." Sarah looked at his innocent expression and gritted her teeth. Even though she knew he was putting on that expression deliberately, she couldn't be angry at him anymore. Fine, fine, Mr. Hero in the shadows. She waved her hand and looked at him. Now you need me to assist you in training your water. Wait, since when did you have a water path? Varian laughed at her incredulous expression, while not forgetting to snap a shot. Exactly. I don't have it now. I will awaken in that path. But I need you to speed up the whole process. Saying so, Varian explained a bit of how he progressed through fighting with awakeners of the same path. Sarah gaped at his words and looked like she saw the world end. If it was anyone else, they'd have looked at him like he was a monster. But her gaze didn't change much, except for the wild surprise. After a while, she nodded. It can't be helped then. But when you're free, we should go on a D-date. Leave it to me. I'll never forget. Varian patted his chest in reassurance. In his mind, he said. Boo, said a remainder. You know, just in case. Sarah got out of his embrace and tapped her comm. A few files popped up and she started going through them. Varian could see that it was her journal. She took notes of her divine path progress. Sarah, aren't you going to ask what I need this water path for? He scratched his cheek. Sarah kept her gaze on the comm and shrugged. No. You will tell me if you can, right? But please be silent for a few minutes. We'll need to get you to level 4 at all costs. Varian wanted to say something, but in the end, he could smile softly. He felt lucky. Boo, remove the remainder. I won't forget. Boo rolled its eyes and did what it was told. Stupid master. Even if you forgot, Boo won't forget. At the same time, the ghost ship dived down and entered an ocean. After diving around a mile deep, they found a special region. Water was barred from entering what looked like a small town. In the center of the town was a large gate with intricate carvings. Dungeon Gate. It was a low-water dungeon called Wet. Varian swore that the irony in the title was too much. Whoosh. The soldiers guarding the dungeon didn't notice the ghost ship entering the gate. Whoa. Varian widened his eyes as he saw a world full of rivers, lakes, waterfalls, and every water-related thing. There was only a bit of land here and there. Splash. Fishes longer than a human with sharp teeth jumped out from one pond to another from time to time. There was even a long snake that climbed up the waterfall. A huge turtle inhaled and drank up nearly half of a pond's water. In the water bodies and all around, there were plants of various colors, blue, green, violet, and pink. Varian saw a few plants manipulate water and turn it into ice, killing a few small fish. He also saw fish strangling other fishes through the manipulation of water and devouring them. Wow. For instance, Blue Whipper, a jellyfish-like creature but with only one tentacle. Its tentacle was made of a special fiber that was extremely conducive to the flow of water mana. Blue Whipper's attack was actually magnified due to this special biological structure. How much? Whoosh. Standing on the banks of a pond, Varian saw a thin, long, green tentacle rush at him to rip him apart. Midway, the green tentacle suddenly turned blue as it exuded an icy breath and its tip grew a very thin, but very sharp ice crystal. Caw. The sound of wind being cut sounded as the whip finally reached Varian's bare arm. Sarah looked at him from the side while keeping an eye on the nearby creatures. Gotcha. The sound of a glass breaking caused Sarah to flinch and squint her eyes at Varian. You. The ice crystal, the culmination of every bit of Blue Whipper's power, was shattered into pieces. Varian's arm, on the other hand, didn't even have a single scratch. He glanced at the Blue Whipper in disinterest and pointed a finger at it. Cree. With the sounds of two soft but firm membranes rubbing against each other, the Blue Whipper was crushed into pieces. Its blue blood splashed high into the air before it turned into green gas. As the gas spread, the small plants, fishes, and animals that inhaled it directly died. Nasty fish. Varian shook his head and checked his status panel. The system showed a thumbs down emote and added. Work harder. How is it? Sarah approached him and looked at him with a bit of eagerness and expectation. This whole awakening in a new path was truly bizarre to her. But since she decided to believe him, she didn't doubt him again. Should try harder, Varian said and sighed. Whatever the case might be, that blue whipper was only level 1. His physical defense was too high for the water mana to even enter his body. Sarah hesitated for a moment and asked. Why don't I do it? This was something that always puzzled her. If any water awakener could do it, then why not her? A peak level 6 water awakener? I don't want to gain resistance against you, Varian stated. Resistance? Sarah raised a brow. Think of it like this, the more I fight with someone, the more adaptive I become to that person's or creature's style. I'm essentially learning that person's aura usage, but most of it happens unconsciously. So, slowly but surely I become aware of how to use my mana, chi, etc. But the problem is if I use any once distinctive creature or person as the main source, there's a high chance I'll run into bottlenecks that are hard to solve. And the progress I get from fighting that person would also decrease over time. To progress quickly, I need more diversity. He explained patiently. This was the only time ever that Varian said this out to anyone. Even Boo got a short answer. Sarah listened to his words and sighed in shock once again. This is just, let's go. She pulled his hand and with a snap, they were deep inside a lake. Varian also noticed that an invisible sphere seemed to be covering them. There was not a drop of water in a 5-meter radius. He turned to Sarah and she simply smiled. You can swim without getting wet. Cool, right? Varian didn't know how to swim, so he stiffly nodded and kicked the underwater ground. Boom! Pillars of water shot up and with the sheer pressure, killed many levels 1 creatures. In the blink of an eye, Varian crossed hundreds of meters despite being in the water and reached an octopus-like creature. Its tentacles instinctively made a strange gesture and Varian suddenly felt the water he was in contact with stiffening. Then this controlled water attempted to break into his body through his eyes, nose, and ears. Varian looked at the octopus in shock. Even though it was only a peak level 2, he felt that this method would kill any non-water path level 3 creatures if they were in his position. Elemental Awakeners' combat strength depends on their environment. He recalled an old point he studied somewhere and sighed in amazement. Shaw! The water got in through his nose as Varian blocked off the rest by forming an invisible shield with his telekinetic power. Ka! This special water, once inside, immediately tried to destroy his heart and lungs. Varian coughed out violently and the nearby water turned red. But only after a few seconds, he stopped coughing and looked fine. It was as if the injury never happened. The water couldn't break his heart or lung defenses. But it did damage them lightly. But that was it. The water mana in that controlled water was quickly confronted by his own aura derivatives and was quickly devoured. Water path level 0, 10/30. The system prompt lit up Varian's eyes and he looked at the octopus-like creature with gleaming eyes. The octopus-like creature stiffened and wanted to run away. You! It stiffened and even with its limited intelligence, understood that running away now would be seen as an offense. One more time. Varian stretched his arms and welcomed an attack. The octopus-like creature wasn't sure if what it felt was right. But it seemed like this two-legged creature was asking for more attacks. It didn't want to die, so it didn't risk. Do it. His shout scared the hell out of the creature and nodded, responding in a weird noise. Sraft. Then 2 more attacks followed. Cough. Cough. With 2 blood coughings, Varian was happy. Water path level 1, 0/100, Varian felt the new mana in his body and smiled. The water that seemed like an outside thing till then suddenly felt like a natural home. Varian lightly tapped at his right and a water sphere slowly twisted into various shapes before turning into ice. Nice. He nodded in satisfaction and turned to the octopus-like creature that was about to slip away. He uttered the same dreadful words. One more time. Ugh. When Varian finally captured one of the creatures, it squeaked and burst into pieces of blue and black. The blue and black liquids tried to enter Varian, who simply swatted them away. Sarah walked towards Varian. Her feet lightly touched the river surface, but never got wet. And even though she was walking on water, she showed no sense of discomfort. These creatures can share their fear, and it all adds up. Until now, you graced at least 10 of their members. Now, their fear of you is 10 times. She explained to the sulking Varian. I didn't even kill them though, Varian complained. You traumatized them. Sarah rolled her eyes. Bad fellow. I'm innocent, okay? Varian looked at her with innocent eyes, catching Sarah off guard. Why you? Her cheeks blushed and she quickly turned her head away. Let's go to Giant Walrus. Saying those words, a blue light flashed and she skated across the river and reached the other end. Tisk. Varian snickered and called up his status panel. Water path level 1, 100/100, oh well. Lightning path level 6, 2/6. Varian felt the two distinct mana in his body and probed them with his mental sense. They were very similar, except for their orientation towards the elements. If he had to use a very rough analogy, it was the same person wearing different clothes. Varian recalled his advancement from Lightning Path level 1 to level 2. It needed a more advanced control of water mana. Same with lightning mana. I wonder if... Varian muttered and focused on the water mana in his body. It swiftly flowed through each and every corner of his body before it hit what seemed like an invisible barrier. Varian closed his eyes and muttered to himself. Compress the mana, control it through the water sense, and let it flow freely. He created a lightning barrier around him to remain undisturbed and sat cross-legged in midair. Splash. 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 It was the sound of water gushing from one end to another as it drowned everything in its way. Hua. Then a distinct sound emerged. One that felt like this water was being pressed violently. Ka. Varian's eyes snapped open and a blue light flashed in front of him. The water far away twisted violently, rose into the air and crashed the river. Boom. The impact was similar to a rock or any solid object colliding with the river. Water path level 2, 0/200, Varian grinned and saw Sarah staring at him in the distance. He waved at her and teleported to her. Wow. It's been less than 2 hours. Sarah muttered with a breath of disbelief. AI being a genius is hard. Varian clutched his forehead and lamented. Sarah gritted her teeth. Genius? Even geniuses wouldn't be so scary. As far as she knew, even they took months to reach level 2. This guy. Looking at his goofy grin, Sarah suddenly had the urge to smash him. There. Sharks. Varian suddenly pointed out and without waiting, dashed towards them. As he moved at high speeds above the river surface, water blasted out from either side. Level 3? Good, good. Varian nodded in appreciation as he felt the creature's power. Gra. A violent roar sounded as the sharks noticed him with their water sense. Then, without any provocation from his part, the group of 6 sharks rushed at him. Each of these sharks was as big as a bus and had a very sharp horn on their forehead. What's that for? He wondered, and they gave it away the next moment. Clish. A blinding blue light enveloped the river as the surrounding water mana was pulled into the sharks' horns. Then they formed large ice balls covered by dangerous spikes and shot at him. At the same time, the water under him fluctuated violently and engulfed him before solidifying. He was trapped and the attack arrived. Boom! The ice balls exploded into pieces and the water broke down. Varian walked out of the sight unscathed. Plus 20 XP water path level 2, 20/200, that's actually good." He nodded at the horned sharks in appreciation. He was about to say, "One more time," but recalled his tragic experience with the octopus-like creatures. So, instead, he clutched his chest and knelt on the river's surface before coughing out blood. Crew. Smelling the fresh blood, the sharks went insane. Their eyes turned bloodshot and their horns shone with a rather dark blue light. For the next few minutes, Varian took the attacks head-on, came out, and coughed out blood. The sharks were even more enthusiastic and kept attacking him with all their strength. A few minutes later, even the sharks with their cognitive faculty knew that something was off. Why was this man not dying yet? And that blood, why did it resemble blood of a seahorse? "Arg, I'm super injured, if you attack me once, I'm dead." Varian closed his eyes, clutched his chest, and announced in a tragic tone. After a few moments of awkward silence, he opened his eyes. The sharks were still facing him, but slowly they were moving backward. Sarah, on the other hand, was recording the whole thing. Seeing her mischievous smile, Varian could already imagine this video surfacing at many moments. Fuck. He clutched his chest and really wanted to cough out blood. Then, he turned to the sharks. The poor sharks flinched and stared at him meekly. "Attack me again." He uses his telepath powers and conveyed the meaning. Then, he heard their response. "Boss, please spare us." "Yes, boss. You can have the river, we will live in a lake, no, a pond is more than enough." "Boss, I have an old grandma, an old mother to take care of. Please spare me." "Boss, I have an old son and aged wife to take care of. Please spare me." "Bah. Boss, this guy took my line. I am the one with an old son. Please spare us. You attack me and you live. Or..." Varian's voice trailed off and the sharks immediately caught up. "Haha. I must say, boss, attacking you is my greatest plea, sir. He meant it is his greatest service." "Ah, yes, yes. How can we enjoy beating up boss, right?" "Indeed." And thus, the group of poor innocent sharks worked overtime and complied in every way possible to this boss. Listening to his demands that required more and more mana out of them, one of the sharks lamented. "Don't humans call superiors who let employees work overtime as sharks?" "Apparently, they do. Then why is the other way around? We, the real sharks, are working overtime. Meanwhile, that guy is acting like a shark. Mom Sana, I'm so depressed." "Shut up. That's my mom." "Your mom is my mom, idiot. Then is your wife my wife, stupid." Why did the attack intensity drop? The dreaded voice jolted all the sharks. "We are just super cheering for an incredible attack, boss." "Then do it." "Yeah." If one overdid it, they'd be facing a mana overdraw. And they overdrew the mana overdraw. He's a devil. Looking at Varian, they shuddered. "Bye, boss." The first shark said with the last bit of energy. "I was trying to lose weight and you helped me a lot, boss." "Thanks." A creative shark replied. "It used to be bulky like a bear, now it was skinny like a leopard. Once it returned to its tribe, it was going to be thin-shamed." "Yes, me too. No diet anymore." Another shark exclaimed. Listening to the shark's sincere praise filled with admiration, Varian scratched his cheek in embarrassment. Am I really such a good person? They could have lied. That thought did cross his mind, but sensing how joyous they sounded, Varian thought it was less likely. But they really helped, heh. Staring at the floating blue panel that only he could see, he felt the weight of gratitude towards the sharks. Water path level 2, 150/200, he looked at the shark brothers seriously and he said. Don't worry. I'll visit you guys regularly and help you in weight loss. The sharks almost coughed out blood. Was this man stupid or pretending to be stupid? You can try setting up that program for your fellow humans. Even the most overweight person would shrivel to a zombie. We survived because we are sharks, but that doesn't mean we can take it again. No, boss. We can't bother you anymore. The first shark said in a regretful, yet firm tone. Yes, we can do it ourselves now. The second one replied in a responsible tone. Yes, yes. We urge you, don't waste your precious time by visiting us again. The third one was almost crying. Since they insisted, Varian nodded reluctantly. Then he teleported to Sarah, who was looking at him and the sharks quizzically since the beginning. Lightly tapping on her forehead, he said. Let's go. Huh? Yeah. Sarah snapped out of her daze and followed him into the ghost ship. Their next destination was a mid-water dungeon named Drowner. Whoever is naming this stuff must either be a prankster or a 6-year-old, Varian muttered in dissatisfaction, eliciting a giggle from Sarah. Virgin, wet, simp, now Drowner, this is stupid. Don't you agree? Varian raised a brow. Well, no. Sarah shrugged. They're all made by the Federation's experts. Experts, you say? Varian face-bombed and leaned back on the couch. Are we run by nutjobs? Sarah rolled her eyes and explained. In the Golden Age, these dungeons were conquered and became instrumental in the growth of the human race. Everyone was happy, a bit too happy. The Council of Federation back then was probably the most harmonious of all time. Those guys decided to pick silly names for dungeons, mainly to show that they aren't a big deal anymore. If the Abyssals never appeared, then humanity was ready to expand outside the solar system. By now, we would already be colonizing another planet. With Abyssal's unexpected appearance, the exploration was sidelined while the dungeon names remained. It was Varian who rolled his eyes this time. You know how made up that sounds? It's confidential, but it really happened, Sarah said with a helpless smile. Ugh, Varian groaned in frustration and crossed his arms. Anyway, I hope I reach level 4 soon. The ghost ship exited the dungeon and traveled deep into the ocean. Its speed was affected, but only by a small percentage. After a few minutes, the ghost ship reached what seemed like a large underwater town. Like at the previous dungeon, this town seemed to have a certain treasure that repelled water. So, while they were deep in the ocean, a few miles around the town, there was no water. It was as if an invisible barrier was isolating it. The town had only a couple of defensive facilities and about 100 dungeon guards. To his surprise, Varian saw people other than dungeon guards. Adventurers? He muttered and his brows knit together in confusion. Why here? There were water dungeons above the surface as well. The reason he picked the ones here was that they were deserted. But now, there were some humans who seemed to have just exited the dungeon. Likely to prevent a dungeon break. Sarah shrugged. Varian paused for a moment and nodded. If so, then it made perfect sense. A dungeon break was what it sounded like. Once they exceed a threshold of total power held, the magic beasts of a dungeon would break open and ravage the host planet. Then, upon consuming their prey, the magic beasts would grow strong and give birth. Magic beasts had an incredibly short gestation period, and the maturity for an infant magic beast to reach maturity was only a couple of weeks. Thus, if a dungeon break was allowed, then it'd spell an absolute disaster. While humanity didn't know, this was exactly the method that Abyssals used in the past to wipe out many of their weak enemies. Just send a few dungeons and an entire civilization would be wiped off. Not only that, but the dungeons themselves would have more magic beasts overall. Humanity was also supposed to be wiped off in that manner. But humans did the impossible. They went from the level of low dungeons to high dungeons in a very short period of time. They grew so strong and efficient that they turned dungeons from a threat to resource. Of course, even humanity faced the threat of dungeon breaks in the first decade of the 300s. The threat mainly came from hidden dungeons, like the current one, deep under the ocean. So, to prevent such mishaps, cleanup teams were sent regularly. They hunted monsters in these remote dungeons and erased any possibility of dungeon break. Regular cleanup, huh? Varian squinted his eyes at the 5 figures. They were completely drenched and had multiple gashes on their bodies. Drip. 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 Like water escaping a broken pipe, blood escaped their bodies and splashed on the ground. As if that wasn't enough, one man had a large chunk of his arm missing, as if it was bitten off. What happened? A dungeon guard rushed to the man with the least injuries and asked. Ascension. The man uttered with the last of his strength and fainted. Ascension? Are you sure? The guard yelled with a horrified face, but no one answered him. The rest of the adventurers fainted right after exiting the dungeon. Mark, I'll take them to the emergency cabin first. Another guard elevated the adventurers into the air through his telekinetic power and urged. Yes. Mark nodded with a pale face. He turned to the dungeon gate. As always, the entrance was covered by a thin layer of shiny light. Shoo! The curtain of light quivered and Mark almost ran. Ha! Mark clutched his chest and sighed. He hurriedly took out his comm and informed. Headquarters, mid-dungeon Drowner has a situation. Ascension. Over. What he didn't notice was that an invisible spaceship suddenly dashed into the gate. How? The dungeon spaces were interconnected. That was also the reason cross-tunnel formations work between dungeons as well. The process of a magic beast exceeding its dungeon's level limit was called Ascension. Once it happens, the dungeon space would then open up a connection with a higher dungeon and send off the beast. But the real problem only started. During this short period when the space was open, magic beasts from the higher dungeon would descend into this dungeon. And because of that, the total power of a dungeon would skyrocket, and naturally, a dungeon break would occur. However, it wouldn't be magic beasts of that lower dungeon that would break outside but the magic beasts of the higher dungeon. By expelling these higher energy creatures, dungeon would once reduce the overall power and achieve stability. So, in the case of Drowner Dungeon, it meant that a peak level 6 beast was about to advance to level 7, and once that happens, level 7, level 8, and perhaps level 9 magic beasts would break out of this dungeon. This underwater town would be destroyed in seconds. But the real damage would come once these beasts reached the coast, which they would in a few seconds and attack the cities. Oh well, I just wanted normal training. As Varian lamented, Ghostship rushed into the dungeon gate. Whoa! Varian widened his eyes as he saw a world full of water. There was no sky, no land, nothing. It was only water. What the fuck? Varian glanced above and cursed. Where is the sky for fuck's sake? There isn't one. Sarah shrugged. Yes, master. Boo appeared in front of him and tapped in empty air. A spherical hologram appeared and at the edge of the hologram was a shifting red mark, indicating their position. This dungeon is essentially a large sphere filled with water, a mini ocean of sorts. If you reach its edge, you exit the dungeon. Sarah explained. Varian nodded in surprise and looked out. The vast world of this mini-ocean was filled with colorful, beautiful, and dangerous species. Lantern fishes, killer whales, ice octopus, and more. Varian, the best place to train water path is in the water itself, Sarah said and walked to the exit. Come on. She opened the door and jumped out. Whoosh. Varian followed her and entered the mini-ocean. As he felt the cool and soft sensation of water from every part, Varian sighed in relief. But he still had a problem. I can't breathe, Varian told Sarah. Of course, with his level, he had no problem for a few hours. But it still irked him. Sarah nodded and opened her mouth. Usually, water would have gone in, but it didn't happen. Once you get to level 3, these problems would be cleared. Just like lightning resistance, you know? Sarah answered patiently. Varian nodded in anticipation. Until he reached level 3 in the lightning path, his own lightning attacks would hurt him. But once he did, his own attacks didn't hurt him and he also gained a sense of resistance against natural lightning. "Let's start the training," Varian said and was about to pick a good-looking turtle when Sarah asked. "Can you show me your full strength? All the auras and paths?" "Huh?" Varian was confused. "There's no one in the dungeon anyway, I just want to confirm something." She insisted. "Fine." Varian nodded and released his aura. Boom. 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 With a single punch, a vacuum appeared as water in that region was blown away. Next, a large space crack appeared in the middle of the mini-ocean before it was swallowed by a lightning dragon, only to be filled with fierce vines of a sturdy plant. Then even the vines were swept away by the telekinetic power. Holy! Sarah almost cursed feeling the extent of his power. She improved greatly after the solar trial. But his improvement was just absurd. He was level 5 back then and now peak level 6. What the fuck? Tell me I'm dreaming. She said with deadpan eyes that refused to accept reality. Well, no. I'm peak level 6. Varian replied, only to get a soft punch in the shoulder. I want to die. Sarah leaned against him and muttered in a depressed voice. Don't compare yourself with me. Varian patted her head lightly. Sarah's eyes narrowed and she held his arm comfortably. She thought Varian was comforting her until he added. I awakened less than 3 months ago. You all who awakened years ago are comparing yourself with me? How unfair for me. You. Sarah glared at him with a pout. Ha ha ha. Varian laughed and pinched her soft cheeks lightly. I'm kidding. I have a different way of progressing. So, don't compare yourself with me. By the way, how strong are you? Waiting for you to ask, Sarah smirked and released her aura. Boom. A chaotic water current rose and swept away the school of fish in the distance. Not only did the chaos subside, but as her aura continued to rise, the mini-ocean had a mini-tsunami of sorts. Wow. You are stronger than me. Varian muttered in shock. As far as he remembered, Sarah in the solar trial was somewhere between January 6th and February 6th power bracket. But now, was this June 6th? What the fuck? Well, I'm not that strong, Sarah said with an embarrassed face. No. You are. There's no shame in admitting it. Varian said with a serious face. I mean it literally, Sarah exclaimed. My water powers are amplified here. But if it's outside, your strength, it's equal to mine. Glad to hear I caught up. Varian simply smiled. You surely did. Sarah trailed off as she looked at him with a complicated gaze. The first time they met, the distance between them was enormous. No one thought that Varian could ever catch up. And now, the distance between them was 0. But Sarah was scared. She knew that from now on, it'd be her chasing after his steps. Would she ever be able to catch up? Sarah bit her lip as she felt a great sadness enveloped her. But she quickly shook her head and gave him a cheerful smile. Why don't we fight the Ascension monster? Wait, what? Her proposal really caught him off guard. With our strengths, we should be able to do it. Sarah insisted, partly because it was true, but mostly because she wanted to fight together with him as an equal before the chance slipped out. Just like you, its powers would be amplified. It's very dangerous. Varian rubbed his chin in thought. Even if he used all his powers, he would be equal to 4/6 or 5/6 of peak level 6. That strength was far from enough. Even if Sarah teamed up, it won't be sufficient. Let's just give it a try, alright? It can also help you with your water path training. And if anything goes wrong, there's always Boo. She said, with a bit of pleading in her voice. Varian looked at her sparkling eyes and nodded reluctantly. And the duo soon reached the heart of the mini-ocean. In the crystal blue water, they saw a long mass of blackness. That mass was as large as a mountain. The mountain moved and shrunk, and they saw what it truly was. A giant black snake that just uncoiled. It was longer than a mile and bigger than a house. Holy shit. Varian fell silent for a moment and his eyes alternated between the giant snake and Sarah. Should he first attack or talk? He knew the answer. You curse, it's very cute. Varian smiled. At hashtag, Sarah opened her mouth but no words came out. Stomping in frustration, she turned to the giant snake. It's all because of you. Why did you grow to be so long? She cursed and covered herself with water mana. Even in the light blue water, with the addition of mana, she glowed like a goddess in blue. Ha! As Varian sighed, Sarah clenched her fist and stirred the water mana around her. Whoosh! Like a missile blasting water, she reached the giant snake. Roa! The backwater snake was startled by a strong aura approaching it and was now completely awake. By then, Sarah was already above the snake's head, the head which was as big as a fucking house. Shwa! With a twirl of mana, she conjured a long but thin ice spear. The spear was mostly white except for the tip exuded an almost blinding blue light and it was also where most of the mana was concentrated. To put it into perspective, that tip was enough to blow up a hill. Ha! Moving a foot back, Sarah forced all the strength in her body towards her arm. As a body awakener, the force she applied on the ice spear was so enormous that it started to shake violently. If she applied the same force on anything else, it'd have broken to pieces. If the material subjected to the force was durable, then if Sarah throws it, that material would also have the power to bring down a hill. As she stacked her water and body powers, Sarah shot the spear at the giant snake's head. Boom! Water was blasted out of the area and a null zone was formed in the surrounding 500 meters. Varian watched in shock as he felt the enormous power reaching the complete peak of level 6. Even though it was amplified by the environment, Sarah's power was truly terrifying. Let me see if we can end this here. He thought and used his telepath powers. Cree! The giant snake's eyes turned red as a severe pain stuck its head. Whoosh! Right then, the shiny blue light quickly reached the snake's head. To be precise, it reached the area between the snake's huge eyes. Roak! Rather than hissing, the snake roared with red eyes and Varian had an ominous premonition. Without hesitation, he teleported to Sarah in an instant and grabbed her by the shoulder. Boom! The moment he teleported away, it happened. The area where Sarah was previously standing was suddenly filled with icy spikes and exploded violently. Boom! Water from the surrounding mile was blown away. Gulp! Sarah gulped nervously and stared at the monster. The shining spear was about to strike down the snake. Just one more second and it'd be dead. Sarah's eyes, however, had no expectations. She and Varian knew from its previous attack that it wasn't going to be killed so easily. Hiss! With a sharp hiss, the black scales of the snake turned into ice blue. Then over the scales, another layer of thin, but mana-rich ice armor was formed. The spear struck the armor. Boom! Gotcha! The ice armor was instantly broken, but the price was a significant drop in the spear's momentum. Pa! By the time it reached the snake's ice blue scales, the spear was only able to leave a bruise. Really? Even though she expected it, Sarah couldn't help but sigh. Her amplified attack would have seriously injured, if not killed, any peak level 6, but unfortunately, it wasn't her own power that was amplified. Ada, Varian was about to say when he teleported them again. Boom! The location they were standing previously was instantly frozen and exploded with such a force that it'd have seriously injured any peak level 6. Cough. Cough. Varian and Sarah appeared a few hundred meters away. Unlike the last time, they weren't unscratched now. Their bodies were covered in a thin layer of ice and a few ice spikes were embedded into their body, causing them painful and chilly bleeding. Mana, shit. As the water mana wreaked havoc in his body, Varian flinched as his face instantly turned pale white. He forced down the blood in his throat. Feeling an imminent danger, he was about to teleport them again. "Let's attack separately," Sarah said, and once again shot towards the giant snake. As the stronger of the two, she decided to attract the main focus. If she was with Varian, he'd be facing more risks. Boom! Varian teleported away, but due to the thin but potent layer of ice covering him, his movements were a bit slow. So, he was a bit late. Like a flood devouring a village, the violent water which glowed blue enveloped him. Gray. Varian braced himself as he hurriedly covered himself with a barrier of lighting and telekinetic powers. But both his lighting and telekinetic paths were far weaker than the giant snake's water path. Boom! The glowing water shrunk unto itself and exploded with an intensity enough to injure a peak level 6. Fuck! Varian appeared a few hundred meters away and clutched at his injuries, but realized that he was bleeding everywhere. The cuts of ice spikes, the lightly broken bones, and the crushed muscles, it was a bad injury that could have been avoided. As water filled in the null zone created by the fight, his blood mixed with the soft and cool liquid, dyeing everything around him red. Varian learned his lesson and didn't waste a moment before he teleported away once again and again and again. His delay increased, but despite that, his quick action saved him as ice spears pierced through the area he previously stood. Varian kept teleporting near and around the giant snake. He attacked it multiple times with separate powers to get an idea of his own power, but soon realized it was a bad idea. By relying on only one path, he couldn't even break the ice armor. So, Varian started using 2 powers, then 3, and kept increasing the number. Boom! Boom! Meanwhile, Sarah's figure flickered as she moved at fast speeds around the humongous snake. With each step, she'd attack the creature with a combination of water body attacks. While Varian's strength came from 6 relatively weaker paths, Sarah's came from 2 strong paths. Considering that she was practicing them for years, she was significantly better than him at using them together. Gotcha! Gotcha! The ice armor always broke, but at the price of its own existence, prevented Sarah's attacks from having any obvious effect. The best she ended up inflicting was a larger bruise. But without a shred of doubt, perhaps on herself or perhaps on him, Sarah kept dodging the ice attacks. But from the way she moved, she was under tremendous pressure. From time to time, one of the attacks would brush past her and cause a cut on her skin. I should change the dynamic. Varian muttered as he once again escaped from an attack using teleportation. Status A/N, there was a real-life emergency. So, the release time was messed up. Sad face. Sarah's injuries were slowly increasing. But she could last for a few more minutes easily. If it was purely a one-on-one, Sarah would have lost quickly. The gap between a magic beast that was just about to reach level 7 and a 4/6-5/6 level 6 was not a joke. But since the snake also had to keep an eye out of Varian, Sarah's fight was easier. Varian's telepath powers were also a significant reason. However, as time went on, Sarah would grow weaker, and eventually, the snake would be able to take down them both. Varian decided to advance to level 3 before trying to finish off the thing. But right then, one of Sarah's wounds relapsed and she fell into a dangerous situation. One hit and she'd be seriously injured. Ugh! Varian teleported right in front of the snake and pulled his arm back. As the snake's water sense locked onto him like a predator's gaze, he pulled out every trick in his arsenal. His arm shifted into a sturdy branch, a layer of solidified space covered the branch, which was further covered by layers of telekinetic power and lightning. Then, his mental power continued to attack the giant snake as the creature squirmed in the water, or where the water was before the fight blew away everything. Caw! The giant snake let out a weird cry. Varian didn't know what it meant, but he knew it was expressing grief. He grinned and added the final trick. He poured all his strength into his fist and punched hard. Bam! Gotcha! His fist was like a sledgehammer that slammed into a wall, and perhaps even the giant snake felt the same as it was abruptly slapped across the mini-ocean. Shriek. With a furious scream, the snake witnessed its entire body flip. Fucking hell. Varian teleported right before the entire area he was at was drowned by water explosions. This thing is too defensive. Seeing the fresh bruise on the snake's ice-blue scales, Varian clicked his tongue in an equal mix of wonder and frustration. How about a combined attack on one spot? Sarah's voice sounded. Varian pondered for a moment and shook his head. If the first combined attack fails, then it'd be way more defensive. So, they could catch it off guard only once. From then on, the giant snake would be overly cautious and wouldn't give them any chance. So, they need to ensure an effective surprise strike when they attack it together at the same spot, which hopefully would break its scales and inflict serious damages, if not directly kill it. If it was a bit weaker, I would have used it for training. Varian mused and said. We'll do it once I reach level 3. Because when he reaches level 3, he could. But breaking the bottleneck takes time, no? Sarah wanted to ask but chose to believe him instead. With a slight nod, she wove an ice spear into existence. Her figure disappeared the next instant and she had already begun a fierce fight. Varian was once again targeted by the ice and water attacks, some of which he dodged while others, he was slightly hit. However, he managed to focus amid this heated battle and channel his mana forward. Shwa. As the bottleneck broke, Varian felt a sense of connection with water all around. It was similar to his lightning path but somewhat different. He still continued to teleport, but the changes were obvious. The ice layer covering his body hurt him less and the water attacks that he was grazed by inflicted lower injuries. Varian used this to his advantage as he deliberately started getting injured, but carefully controlled how injured he'd be. As a result, the water mana of the giant snake entered his body increased. Earlier, its effects weren't significant. But now, Varian could feel his internal organs cooling down to dangerous levels. His other aura derivatives, Chin, Prana, and Lightning mana waged a fierce battle to stop the foreign water mana. But they were struggling greatly as Varian felt his body stiffen with each passing second as a dreary coolness began to envelop him. Almost there. He muttered and enveloped the giant snake's water mana with his own. Jerchish. Varian immediately coughed out blood as a chilling pain spread from his lungs. What he did was similar to smashing a rock with an egg. His water mana was almost devoured, if not for the other aura derivatives saving it. Humph. Varian kept up his outward activities while he separated a small part of the giant snake's mana and enveloped it inside his own water mana. Krah. The reaction was still violent, but bearable. As Varian focused intensely on the foreign water mana with his own, he felt a sense of euphoria wash over. It was like attending a test you never studied for, but just by seeing the question paper, the answers appeared. And for Varian, he felt more and more proficient in the application of water mana. +10, +10, +10, but he also knew that if he used too much of the giant snake style, he would end up in a bottleneck. So, he drew from his experience of lightning path. As they were both natural elements, there were a lot of common things and soon, Varian's progress skyrocketed. Yes. With a yell, Varian appeared in front of the snake and punched down again. This time, along with all the previous powers he put in the punch, there was also a water curtain. Boom. The snake was once again blown away, but the injury he inflicted was only a bruise. A more severe one. But still only a bruise. Varian nodded at Sarah. She instantly understood. Blue. Sarah appeared above the snake. The creature was already annoyed and opened its giant mouth to swallow her whole. Humph. With a raise of her hand, Sarah's arm was covered in an ice gauntlet. With no mercy, she struck down on the dragon with all her strength. Kacha. The ice armor broke like always, but being beaten 2 times in a row pissed off the creature. Kree. It growled in rage and focused all its power to smash Sarah into pieces. In its anger, it lashed out with the greatest force so far. Sizz! Sarah was caught off guard and was instantly pierced by 2 ice spikes. One through her left shoulder and the other through her right lung. Like a rag doll, she had been blasted away. Right then, Varian teleported above the snake with chilly eyes filled with killing intent. As his water path now reached level 3, Varian was more aware of the giant snake's mana condition. Thus, despite the area where the ice armor was shattered being too large, Varian was able to spot the exact area where water mana's flow was severely lacking, mainly thanks to his level 3 water path. And he gave the giant snake no time to cover itself up with ice guard again. Combining all his powers into his fist except his telepathic powers that were directly affecting the snake, he punched down. It was a simple punch with almost no difference from earlier. But this punch directly touched the ice-blue scales of the snake. It was over. Gotcha! Cree! The snake spun in the water in circles as silver blood gushed out of its massive wound. His attack had not only seriously injured it but also dealt a fatal blow. As it was on the verge of death, the giant snake's eyes flared blue and its rage broke all thresholds. It slapped Varian with its tail tip covered in dense water mana. Boom! Varian flew away a few miles and ended up near Sarah. Cree! With a furious cry, the snake died. A strange silence settled as water began to flood into this artificial void. Water path level 3, 100/400, plus 80, humph. Varian snorted at the water mana continuously injuring him. But the suffering gave him rewards. Plus 2 XP, plus 2 XP. Plus 2 XP, as the water mana in his body was slowly expelled, he gained more and more XP until it finally stopped. Water path level 3, 250, plus 150, we did it. Varian heard a tired but cheerful voice and turned to face Sarah. She had a pale but stunning face. Her blue eyes had the color of Earth's sky but were more beautiful than any sky Varian had ever seen. Despite her injuries and torn clothes, she exuded a graceful temperament. Varian. Varian, Varian. She waved her hand weakly. Huh? He snapped out of his daze. We did it. Varian smiled at her and nodded. Sarah pumped her fist into the air and said, "This is the best fight date." Ha ha ha. Varian started laughing, though laughing with injuries hurt. Then he looked at her and grinned. "One day, I'll take you to conquer Pluto back. That'd be the best date." A/N, there was a real-life emergency. So, the release time was messed up. Sad face. So, the team responsible for this area had to hurry, giving up all other tasks. "It's dead, Captain," another member said, with a confused voice. In front of them was a large and long corpse, the giant snake. If it was put on the ground, it'd scare the heck out of people. Nearly a mile long and as thick as a large bus, it only looked more intimidating in the water. In fact, even for the captain who had a long experience of dealing with magic beasts, imagining such a gigantic thing move freely in this mini-ocean was scary. The autopsy report? The captain shook his head and glanced at the woman awkwardly. While she wore the same black uniform of the emergency squad, she still stood out. On top of her beautiful face and slender figure, her purple earrings added to her charm. She was the last to join his squad but also received the most attention. Unlike everyone else, she was neither a water awakener nor a level 7. Rather, she was a space awakener and a peak level 8. Normally, she'd be assigned to a much stronger team. But the problem was that she abruptly took a long leave citing medical reasons and only recently returned. They are questioning her loyalty. The captain sighed and he knew exactly what they were thinking. Even if she did join Shadow Guardians, they're over, right? Why do you still keep this going? Whatever the reason, she was their assurance in entering this dungeon when they knew beasts of high level were about to descend here during Ascension. If the beasts were level 7, they could cope. Level 8, they could leave them to her. And most importantly, if level 9, she could teleport them away. No problem, Captain. The woman teleported to the snake's head and her space sense enveloped its body completely before fixing on its head. If the snake's head could be compared to a bus, then half of the bus was forcibly torn apart. The woman carefully studied the aura while checking the readings from her device. It died recently. Just 3 minutes ago. Her first report caused everyone to widen their eyes. But how? We didn't see anyone. The vice captain of the team said in a disgruntled tone. He and others thought that since a level 8 entered their team, she committed a crime severe enough for such a demotion. So, they looked down upon her. In the army, criminals within were treated worse than criminals outside. Idiots. The woman snorted and ignored him while the others fell into contemplation. Maybe it's a level 9 senior? They won't be caught by the dungeon guards who are too weak. A soldier raised a finger and proposed. Yes. That makes perfect sense. Not only sneaking in, but also one-shotting this creature. I guess it's at least level 8. The teammates nodded and supported the opinions. The captain, however, didn't. Unlike his team, which was full of newbies that just reached level 7 and were in their early 30s, he was a veteran and was almost 50 years old. Of course, his talent was evidently lower than them, but his experience was vastly superior. The chances of a high awakener saving the situation are slim to none. He smiled bitterly. As far as he knew, only one person had the ability to sneak into dungeons and arguably the strength. Dreamer. It was a very wild guess, but ever since he heard that Dreamer was found at the Mars spaceport, the captain had a hunch that he was coming for Earth. Incredible. The woman let out a gasp, drawing the attention of the squad. What is it? The captain hunched forward, not noticing the tremor and anticipation in his own voice. There are 9 different auras. The first attack has 2 auras and is done by a dual awakener. But the second attack is just incredible. She looked at him and said with a gasp. You mean the second attack had 7 auras? The captain deduced what her words meant and flinched. The woman nodded confidently. Are you sure? The vice captain scowled. Maybe it's 7 attacks. You heard that right. 7 auras in one attack, not 7 attacks with a different aura each. She said with unshakable confidence, and it shook everyone. Impossible. The captain shook his head. I insist. She pressed on. We'll report what you got to say. Let the higher-ups decide. The captain waved his hand. To be sure, he didn't believe a bit of what she said. It was clearly impossible. So, he suspected that she was either crazy or was trying to misdirect them. I think she'll be expelled. He shook his head inwardly. Let's check out this dungeon first. If there's any beast that's about to ascend, end it. Thus, the emergency squad got to work. As the captain didn't trust her, the woman wasn't assigned any task. She was told to be on hold for any emergencies. 7 auras is impossible. Am I going crazy already? Luel rubbed her chin in confusion. If so, then I better have the last talk with her. She tapped her purple earring and a special calm appeared in her arm. A woman with sky blue eyes appeared in front of her. She seemed to be surprised to receive the call and hurriedly asked. I tried finding, but you were no longer on Venus. Where are you? Earth. Luella shrugged nonchalantly. It's dangerous. Blue Flash sighed. I know. Luella didn't seem to be bothered and continued. And I contacted the Shadow Guardians outside Earth. Blue Flash's chest heaved up and down. Even though the ones outside were less than 1% of the ones on Earth, they were still precious. But remembering their current situation, Blue Flash shook her head bitterly. How many of them hate Enigma? Well, 30%, Luella answered after a moment of recall. The 70% don't believe the allegations. Unlike the ones on Earth, these guys traveled more and know the world better. I should be happy, I guess. Blue Flash said lightly, and then her eyes sharpened. What did you do with the 30%? Heh. Aren't you girls busy escaping? I heard Dreamer is also with you. Luella smiled. I have a lot of time if it means killing. Blue Flash smirked. Luella flinched lightly at her cold eyes but quickly regained her composure. Sucks to be you. I killed them already. She covered her mouth and giggled. Blue Flash rolled her eyes and suddenly asked. Why did you join the emergency squad? Is every Athena agent so privy to army files? Luella asked with a bitter tone. Blue Flash already found her posting even though it was supposed to be a secretive issue. It's only me. Blue Flash shrugged and narrowed her eyes. And don't deflect my question. TCH. Luella clicked her tongue at the failed attempt. I came to join the military for real this time. What else should I do? Shadow Guardians are over. There is nothing we can do. Blue Flash fell silent. Recalling Varian's figure, she blurted. Don't be so sure. Don't give me that. Luella waved her hand. All right, what did you contact me for? You see, I made a new discovery on a set of aura samples. But even I think it's impossible, but no matter how I check, it's correct. You were never wrong. Blue Flash frowned. I think so too. So, maybe I'm going crazy. Luella shrugged. If I go insane, then publish this report after I die. Saying so, she tapped her comm and sent the files to Blue Flash. 7 auras in one attack. Blue Flash exclaimed. Luella squinted at her reaction. It was a surprise, yes. But not the kind of surprise when you encounter something impossible. But the kind of surprise when your secret is exposed. Blue Flash, however, quickly composed herself and checked the auras and their corresponding levels. Body, space, lightning, morpher, telekinetic, telepath are all level 6. And water, it's level 3. Just how? Hey, what do you know that I don't know? And why are you being surprised at the water path? Luella questioned eagerly. One day. Blue Flash didn't seem to hear her as she muttered in a daze. Oh heavens, had been only one day, but... Her chest heaved up and down as she weakly collapsed onto the couch, her knees no longer having any strength. We have a monster. And Varian had been trying to do that for a few hours already. Focus. Sarah's cold voice reverberated in the desolate dungeon. It was a cold desert filled with many ice monsters, well, used to be filled. Now, it's only filled with their corpses. As a result of Varian's rather reckless fighting, he was quick to reach the peak of level 3 but also hit a tough bottleneck. Water path level 3, 400, fight, Sarah said and waved her hand. A blue light flashed and an ice dagger was condensed. It was a stable and exquisite structure. But the real beauty was that it was made of only a level 3 mana. Sarah gestured lightly with her hand and the dagger shot at Varian. Varian's water sense was already focused on Sarah when she was condensing the dagger. He tried to replicate her movements and channeled his water mana. Shwa! A trembling ice dagger was formed. Unlike its counterpart, it was pale blue, shaky, and looked like it could collapse at any moment. Cling! The two daggers, made of roughly equal mana, collided. Gotcha! Like a stone meeting glass, Sarah's dagger easily destroyed Varian's and reached him. If it was a normal level 3, the dagger would have frozen them silly. Of course, due to his body path, it barely made a scratch on Varian. But Varian seemed to be really frozen as he stood with a blank gaze. Condense. They were both made of equal mana, but their strengths were vastly different. Creating structures from ice was different from lightning. Lightning solidified differently. Lightning's stability coefficient was different. Lightning was explosive, fierce, and electrocuting. Water was none of those. So, he couldn't use his lightning path lessons to create stable items from water and ice. Varian, focus, Sarah said and waved her hand. An ice phoenix condensed into existence. Flapping its wings, it streaked hundreds of meters in the blink of an eye. Varian hurriedly set up an ice armor to block it. Screech. With a sharp cry, it shrank to a small dagger and penetrated Varian's ice armor. In front of the glowing ice dagger, Varian's armor was more fragile than glass. It broke upon contact and pierced into his body. Greg. Blood spilled on the ground as sweat poured down Varian's forehead. Unlike before, this was a level 6 ice dagger. While it wasn't Sarah's strongest attack, it wasn't so weak that his body defense could ignore it. As the freezing coldness spread from his stomach to his lungs, liver, and heart, Varian closed his eyes and focused on the foreign object. From the edges of the dagger, the water mana flooded his body, but the ice dagger was stable despite the mana outflux. If Varian tried to replicate it, the dagger would have collapsed upon contact. Focus. Focus. As his face paled from the coldness, Varian focused on studying the water mana and the ice dagger. As the blood gushing out of him started to freeze, Sarah bit her lips so hard that she started to bleed. I hate this. She thought bitterly but maintained her cold face. It was the persona she showed in front of the academy. Cold, distant, and aloof. It was a method for her to escape the endless invitations from cadets. Now, it was her coping method to help him. Taking a deep breath, she said. Focus on how the ice phoenix changed into a dagger. When we create an object, be it a sword or club, we aren't just making an abrupt shape, but a perfect entity with all its properties. A sword should be sharp, an arrow should be fast, a spear should be piercing. This quality can't be given by simply wishing for it. You need to understand, try and correct yourself. The cold winds rustled the frozen leaves on the ground and Varian's mind slowly went into a deep focus. I hope you can still keep laughing in a few days. Irene Niles' face flashed in front of his eyes as her voice sounded with mockery and confidence. Ha! Julius clenched his fists and wiped the sweat that unknowingly appeared on his forehead. Why, what's her confidence? He muttered, having lost count of how many times he pondered over this question. The only troublesome people she's associated with are Ares and Dreamer. Julius' eyes narrowed. Ares can't help her. Even he is sending people from Neptune to take part in the expo. But Dreamer. As he uttered that name, Julius had an odd feeling. Uncertainty. Despite knowing the ghost ship's capabilities, he didn't know what Dreamer could do. And that irked him greatly. But he's still moving with Enigma. Unless he abandons ghost ship, he can't even attend the expo. Julius glanced at the tracker and hummed. Even though the ghost ship's speed was slower than earlier, it was still faster than any patrol ship. Maybe ghost ship is also having effects from such a long chase. If it collapses, I can capture it and have its technology reverse engineered. Julius supported his chin on his hand and smiled. If we can have a fleet of ghost ships, then while abyssals won't be solved immediately, they won't survive for more than a decade. Clap. Clap. Julius clapped lightly and a butler teleported in front of his study. Bowing slightly, he asked. Master? Prep won the expo to 4 days earlier. Julius looked at the setting sun and muttered. Master. That's tomorrow. The butler exclaimed in a terrified voice. Yes. Julius merely nodded. It doesn't matter anyway. The important guests will come or watch it through VR. The only thing that matters is the scientist's test, but they won't mind coming a few days early. Yes, sir. The butler bowed. I will inform everyone and make the necessary preparations. He raised his head and looked at Julius as if asking for permission. Julius waved his hand and the butler teleported away. He knew that the butler won't be resting until the next day. But that much is to be expected. You can't be a Xander family butler and that too, the butler of the family head for nothing. Soon, the news of postponement sent tremors across the solar system. All the major powers were dumbfounded and requested Julius to reconsider his abrupt decision. They all had tight schedules and changing them at the last minute wasn't a good idea. But Julius didn't budge. He simply told them it was an important decision and that he held the right to his own decision. They were guests of the expo and he was the host. Not the other way around. Everyone could only compromise. Thus, every participant who was to take the Gamma potion got their message. Schwa. In an ice dungeon, an ice dagger collided with another ice dagger and they both broke into pieces. Sarah's face had a bright smile as she hugged him lightly. Congratulations. The joy in her voice couldn't be concealed and it really infected Varian, who also smiled brightly. Varian held her waist and stroked her hair as he whispered, "Thanks. Water Path level 4, 0/1000, now we just need to train you to reach level 5 in 4 days, Sarah muttered in a relaxed tone. Right then, a message arrived and Varian frowned. It looks like we don't have any more time. But no matter how much she tried, she couldn't deny the crystal clear text on the comm, the Gamma Expo is preponed by 4 days. Apologies for the inconvenience. Crash. She nearly crushed her comm as her chest violently heaved up and down. She looked at Varian's tired appearance, the raging fury in her heart blazed, threatening to burn down their enemies. Varian had briefed her about his mission. While she was anxious about his safety, she didn't stop him from his decision. She also saw him train very hard to reach level 3. While others might think he broke the bottleneck to level 3 simply by talent, Sarah knew how many injuries he endured and how much effort he put into it. But this one message sent all his hard work down the drain. Calm down, Sarah. Varian patted her back lightly and said with a weak, but firm voice. Sarah broke the hug and shook her head violently. How can I calm down now? You worked so hard, but those bastards, Varian covered her lips with a finger and patted her head lightly. Despite his pale face, he gave her a reassuring smile. It's going to be all right. A million words Sarah had to say were stuck in her throat as she finally nodded. The expo started at 8 o'clock sharp. But the participants needed to be in the testing fields by 6 o'clock. Then they'd undergo various medical tests among other things before being qualified for the expo. As the Gamma potion testers who'd be monitored from the moment they take the potion, it'd be extremely embarrassing if even one of the 100 candidates had a slight problem. This was after all solar-scale events, not any planetary one. Thus, Varian had to be at the scene by 6 o'clock Earth IDN's time. There were about 6 hours left. As a registered level 4, Varian was supposed to be at the peak of level 4. First, there'd be a fight between all the peak level 4s. After the battle, he'd be given a Gamma potion. He'd then be monitored as the potion helped him reach level 5. Then there'd be another fight with Awakeners, to be clear, criminals who were also level 5. It'd be a death match, quite literally. Varian only briefly mentioned his plan, but as Sarah dug deeper, she realized the risk he was taking. She really wanted to ask, why must it be you? Drip. 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 The white training room in the ghost ship was rather familiar. It was similar to the room where Sarah used to beat up Varian in the name of training back in the academy. See continue. A slightly shaky but confident voice reverberated in the room. You. Sarah couldn't bear to look at the man in front of her anymore. She lowered her gaze, but the sight only distressed her further. The floor, which used to be white, was now painted in red and blue. Puddles of blood, sometimes drawn out in different shapes, sometimes in the shapes of a fist, a palm, were all frozen in shards of ice. Please stop. Sarah gritted her teeth and pleaded. Ta. 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 Following the sound of wobbly footsteps, his voice reached her. We can't give up now. His voice was filled with hope and enthusiasm, but Sarah didn't just hear his voice. Drip. Drop. Drip. She heard his blood splashing the floor, his rough breathing which seemed to be on the verge of collapse, his thumping heart that beat so hard that she feared it might suddenly burst out. She heard everything, including her own heartbeat that seemed to beat so loudly as it protested against everything. "I can't attack you anymore." Sarah finally raised her head and glanced at the man covered in blood. He had horrifying wounds all over his body, his face, his chest, his shoulders. It was as if he climbed out of hell and went back and climbed out, over and over until he stood on his last breath. The sunken eye sockets, the broken jaw, and the caved-in chest, including the many injuries where chunks of flesh was missing. With every detail she saw, her heart ached. "Stop this madness," she begged. "It hurts. It hurts me to see you like this. Training or not, I can't raise my hand against you." Tears flowed down her cheeks as she said in a tone entrenched in deep grief. Varian smiled and slowly raised his bloodied hand. It wasn't easy. Just that simple act caused the wounds to split open and injuries to worsen. But he did it anyway and gently ruffled her hair. Sarah, his voice was plain, but there was a sense of dryness in his voice as if that throat had coughed blood too many times and lost its charm. But it added a sense of solemnity with no match. "The pain you and me are suffering isn't anything compared to the people who died for our and for everyone's sake. We should do this." He smiled at her brightly, despite blood covering his face. It was the reassuring smile he always gave her. Despite trying her best to control herself, Sarah's tears fell once again. But she bit her lip and nodded. As she raised and performed what seemed to be the hardest attack ever, a small ice spear materialized and slowly struck Varian. Except for an ice armor that quickly shattered upon contact, Varian put on no defenses. The ice spear encountered little resistance as his skin was mostly frozen and broken by now, so it directly penetrated deep into his flesh. Varian flinched and shivered violently. The ice spear started letting out mana in uncontrollable amounts. Varian gritted his teeth and suppressed the pained groan. But he couldn't suppress the intense cold inside his body. Varian's teeth chattered as he put up a final defense against the bone-gnawing coldness as he studied the water mana. Ironically, it was the ideal environment to get the greatest results in the shortest time. But it was too hard to accomplish. The cold spread inside him faster than any wildfire. It slowed down his blood, his energy, and even his thoughts. It lured him to give in and close his eyes, to enter a comfortable slumber where this terrifying pain wouldn't reach. Without all this pain, just sleep. Sink into sleep. It won't be painful anymore. "Varian, Mom is waiting for you." Varian's thoughts turned hazy and his eyes started to lose focus. As he was about to reach the point of no return, a warmth enveloped his body. "Ha!" Varian's eyes snapped open as he greedily sucked air in short and rapid breaths. The cold was still there, but it didn't hurt so much anymore. At that thought, a blue screen appeared the same time his alarm rang. Water path level 4, 1000 over 1000, 530. Varian closed his eyes and looked at Sarah, who was tightly hugging him. He opened his mouth but in the end, said nothing but hugged her to his chest. Each such block occupied dozens of miles in radius and the whole secret realm was covered by a few dozen blocks. These were centers of research of the Xander family. As the strongest of the three prime families, the Xanders were a force to be reckoned with, humbled only by the military. However, even the military couldn't discount the Xanders' research wing. Be it funding, talent scouting, nurturing, resources, ask for it and you'd have it all. Of course, the prerequisite was that you were talented enough. The top scientists could even move their scientific bases to the Guardian Islands and marry into the Xander family. To any Earthling, this was considered to be the most honorary thing. Such fame was carefully crafted by the previous Xander heads and continued even under Julius' reign. Julius peered through an enforced glass window and scanned the vials with a blue liquid. While his eyes never left the vial, his ears seemed to have detected someone approaching. "Are there any possibilities of failure?" He sounded very casual, as if he asking about the weather on a Sunday evening. But the old man who was under question stiffened and hurriedly bowed. Blood drained his face as he felt his heart pound in fear. Not the fear of death, that would be much easier. But the fear of wishing to die but unable to. He saw the fate of those that Xanders weren't satisfied with and vowed never to be one of them. There is absolutely no possibility of failure once we check up the testers, sir. He said with the utmost respect. Uh-oh. Julius nodded casually. Then, with the old man's company, he strolled through another block where the ingredients to the gamma potion production were stored. Out of the 100 floors of the block, Julius checked 1 out of every 10 floors. Special herbs, aura crystals, ores, beast cores, special liquids, and so on. As they reached the 89th floor, Julius muttered. My sister was a genius, wasn't she? Ah. Yes, sir. The old man bowed and replied in an excited tone. Without her notes, we'd have never been able to make an Omega potion. If Omega potion didn't exist, then Gamma potion is impossible. Julius' lips curled up and he smirked lightly. Omega potion was initially the promise Roxana gave to all the major powers to erase a girl's existence out of the records. Surpassing all expectations, Omega potion was much better than anyone could have imagined. So, they all agreed. But the problem came after Sia escaped. Even though they had samples of her blood, it obviously wasn't enough. So, Xanders cited many reasons, and somehow cancelled the Omega potions they had to deliver a few months ago. Still, it couldn't be stopped forever. After months of intensive research, they found a way to replace Sia's blood with another ingredient. Brilliant, I must say. Julius smiled and looked inside one of the top floors. His eyes showed satisfaction that was hard to see on the Sovereign's face. With Gamma potion, we'll be game changers. The whole humanity will be under our lead. He declared proudly. The old man hesitated when he heard the words, whole humanity. It seemed like his conscience, which he thought he killed not long, was somehow still alive. It prompted him to open his mouth despite the potential danger and say, Sir, the side effects. Huh? Julius glanced at the old man deeply, and the next second, the old man was stuck to the ground, his limbs twisting in weird angles. Arg, forgive. Forgive me, sir. The old man pleaded. Julius crossed his arms and walked away. Your decisions are the best for humanity. Please, sir. The shout caused Julius to pause and snap his fingers. A bot instantly attended to him and performed emergency treatment. Julius, on the other hand, exited the building and strolled in the garden areas. Side effects? He smirked. What side effects? For what they are gaining, the price they are going to pay is minuscule in comparison. Of course, he knew the chief researcher's worry. If the side effects were found out, then they'd be pretty much fucked up. He'd be fine since he's a sovereign, but Xander family would inevitably fall into disgrace. But that takes years to happen. By then, I'd have already. Julius smirked and shook his head. 5:40, he checked the time and decided to reach the avenue before 9. Until then, he decided to practice. After this expo, the world is going to change forever. After this expo, the world is going to change forever. The anchor announced with burning enthusiasm while Varian and Sarah cuddled on the couch. It's dangerous, Sarah muttered, feeling his arms around her waist. Varian nodded, his breath brushing past her ears, tickling her and causing her to shift her body in his embrace. But I won't stop you, not that I can. Even if you get caught, I will make sure you're safe. Just don't die. She turned around and looked at him seriously. He nodded again, but it seemed to assure Sarah as she smiled brightly. And that smile sent Varian into a trance. His heart raced as he was suddenly aware that he was holding a stunning woman in his arms as she looked at him with a smile that caused his heart to skip a beat. Varian slowly lowered his head and pressed his lips on hers. MHMF. Sarah cried out in surprise, but her protest was cut off as he pulled her deeper into the kiss. Feeling the soft sensation on his lips, Varian looked into her blue eyes. At first, they shyly dodged him, but soon they gazed at him with deep affection. Varian responded with a deeper kiss, and Sarah cooperated awkwardly. Since it was a first for both of them, it was a bit awkward but fulfilling. It was an odd feeling for both of them. They both knew that Varian participating in the expo in the presence of so many high awakeners was a huge risk. They both wanted to express their concerns and seek assurance from the other. However, words didn't do their emotions justice. But it was completely conveyed through this simple and intimate action. For a moment, Varian forgot his every worry. His mother's wish, the memory of Sia, the Abyss Emperor, Julius, Creo, Enigma's problem, everything vanished for a moment. Amidst all the struggles, all the troubles, and all the worries, he was at peace. His heart was racing with the sensation of the wet softness he was experiencing, but it was never so calm. Varian felt a small, slippery thing trying to poke in, and he instantly realized what it was. With a smirk, he chased after it, and soon, their first kiss turned from light to a passionate one. Varian raised his hand and was about to go a step further when, ting! An alarm rang, startling the couple. As Varian and Sarah separated, a thread of silver line connected them. Sarah hurriedly used a water ball to move it away and moved away from him. With her blushing cheeks, she looked adorable. But Varian somehow felt that she also had a question. "What is it?" Varian asked with a smirk, lightly licking his lips. "You." Sarah pointed at him with an embarrassed expression, but in the end, she too sneakily licked her lips and snorted. "Come on. You will laugh at me." "No. I won't. Trust me." At end of every kiss, they gasp in the movies. "Why didn't we?" Sarah asked with an innocent expression. Varian looked at her blushing face and couldn't hold it anymore. Clutching his stomach, he ended up laughing. "Ha ha ha ha. You. I knew you would laugh." Sarah punched him on the shoulders softly and snorted. Sorry. Varian raised his hands and leaned dangerously closer to her face. "Sarah, we're both level 6 body awakeners. We can hold our breaths for hours. If you want a kiss that will leave you gasping for breath once it ends, we can do it in 4 hours. He leaned closer and stretched out his arms. He's really about to do it. Sarah jumped onto her feet and ran off to another room in the ghost ship. "It's time for the expo. I'll see you later. And don't tell anything that happened here to my father, or he might call up entire Earth's army to kill you." She disappeared with a playful warning. Varian simply laughed it off, but neither he nor she knew how close she was to the truth. 5 minutes later, Varian's smile disappeared as he stood in front of a large white building along with 99 peak level 4 testers. A/N, apologies if it didn't come off properly. I'm a novice in writing sensual and intimate acts, for now. I will improvise similar scenes in the future. As the clock ticked, 500 young men and women in a standard blue uniform entered one of the 5 large buildings based on their levels. These 5 buildings were just outside the grand stadium and served as an entrance to them. The participants were divided into 5 groups, with 100 members per group based on their level, which ranged from level 1 to level 5. Varian queued up with his fellow peak level 4 participants. In the ground floor of the building, there were 10 counters of sorts. A level 9, a highly accomplished doctor, and representatives of the 8 planets stood at each counter. 3 things were verified here. First, their level and divine path. And whether they were dual or triple awakeners. Second, their medical condition, whether there was any chance they'd have an adverse reaction to gamma potion. Third, external possessions were all banned. Not even a calm was allowed to the match. Initially, calm was allowed, but Julius removed it later, citing Dreamer as the primary reason. Fourth and finally, their identity. Recently, there have been too many cases of Dreamer using a fake ID to exploit their automated system. So, any candidate who needs to participate must be recognized by the member of their own planet. Only then would they be allowed to exit through the other end of the building and enter the arena. Since the test was this comprehensive, it took 10 minutes for each person. Being the second last in his line, Varian knew he had to stand for almost an hour and a half. Ugh, I think my head is gonna explode from all the training. Varian just wanted to sleep. Even though body awakeners didn't have any problem without much sleep, he was mentally tired. To reach the peak of level 4, he not only endured terrible injuries but also maintained his highest focus for hours. Even he wasn't clear how he was able to do it. At that time, there was only one thought going around in his mind. I can't give up. While he achieved his goal, the consequence was temporary mental fog and a lack of energy. Next. The AI called and the line moved forward. Varian sighed lightly and glanced around. Except for him, everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. They all had a bright smile on their faces as if they won some lottery. Did they get crazy people for the testing? That's ridiculous, but Varian wasn't in the right state to think through things logically. But he did ask Boo about his peers. Master, they are all geniuses, albeit from poor families across the solar system. Heh. Stupid son of a. Varian abruptly stopped cursing. His mind seemed to clear up when he thought of Julius, but soon, it went back to its dizzy state. Bitch. In fact, Julius was clever to let geniuses from all across the Federation join as testers. Else, others could accuse him that he was manipulating the results by using only Earth geniuses, especially since Xanders ruled the planet. Now, the critiques could only shut up. Next. There were only 2 people in front of him, and after waiting for an hour, Varian's mind slowly cleared up. It's like he was suddenly sober. With a functioning mind, Varian looked at the people around him with a complicated expression. Since these were poor geniuses, the reason they came here despite the risk was obvious. Once the Gamma potion gets released, they couldn't afford it. Hey! A cheerful voice sounded from behind. Varian turned back and saw a young man with a bright expression. Hi. Varian nodded. Why so serious? Aren't you excited, bro? The young man asked with disbelief. Varian scratched his cheeks and replied. I'm pretty nervous. We're testers after all. His words drew gazes. The officials didn't respond much, but the rest of the testers seemed to be shocked. Hey, this is something from Sovereign himself. The boy behind puffed out his chest and said. Yes, do you really think they need us as testers? This is a generous opportunity provided to those from poor backgrounds by Sovereign Julius. A girl said with sparkling eyes. She's right. Be grateful, dude. Many of us have decided to join the Xander family. A tall guy pumped his hand and declared. Varian instinctively wants to not only refute but curse the Xanders as the genetic garbage, but held back. He put on a nervous expression and said. I always admired Sovereign Julius and wanted to meet him. Even though I trust the Xander family, the thought that I won't have the chance to repay the favor terrifies me. The gazes on him changed again. They were looking at him with admiration, not knowing that Varian's choice of words was deliberately twisted. He admired Julius so much that he wanted to rip him apart. He wanted to meet Julius to fight him head-on one day. Repaying the favor, repaying them for what they did to Sia, it could only be repaid through extermination of anything called Xander. Next. The AI called again and Varian took a step forward. It was almost over. Next. Varian stood in the designated square as a level 9 water awakener used his water sense to check Varian's aura and level. The man passed a sliver of water mana into Varian's shoulders and after a minute, nodded. Peak level 4 water path. No other traces of aura found. Then, his water sense also scanned Varian for a minute before nodding. No space ring or any treasures. Then it was the medical test. A red light flashed over Varian, and in front of the attending doctor, a hologram filled with different numerical popped up. The doctor studied it seriously for 6 minutes before giving a thumbs up. He is not averse to gamma potion ingredients. Varian was about to sigh in relief, but realizing the final test, he became nervous again. Which planet is he from? And details. The level 9 officer asked. Varian sighed in relief when the man from Neptune stood up. Originally, it was Uranus, but with Irene's current condition, the plan changed. It was Sovereign Ares who helped him out the most in this mission. Even though he did it for Sovereign Irene, Varian was grateful to him. He is Riker, a genius from a small neighborhood of Neptune. At a low age of 18, he reached the peak of level 4. What? Everyone in the facility, be it participants or the administrators, exclaimed in shock. 18 years old, that was essentially a first-year cadet reaching the peak of level 4. Even in Imperial Defense Academy, one of the top 3 of all academies, reaching peak level 4 in the first year would make one a great genius. The likes of such genius could only be surpassed by monsters like Sarah and Charles. And now, such a genius was among them. As they looked at him in admiration, Varian was laughing inwardly. How cute. I'm peak of level 6 and in 5 different paths. And thus, Varian was sent into the Grand Stadium's central ground, Justice Arena. The biggest selling point of the expo was told not through glamorous models or intricate hologram designs, but through simple, plain, and even dull words. Improve talent and increase level. That was enough. Like a tsunami sweeping away all the boats, this one line moved every human. In this day and age, one's own strength largely determined their social standing. But how far one could reach in their divine path was restricted by 2 factors, other than the most obvious: hard work, talent, and resources. The rich could afford the resources. They could train even their low-talented heirs to a respectable level by piling up resources. Of course, that was actually rare as well. Since polygamy was legal, the rich men or women would then have new partners and new children whose talent was satisfactory. Still, the abandoned rich kids at least had no problem with living a comfortable life. But the rest could only rely on talent. Thus, to almost every human, this potion was the object beyond their wildest fantasies. Ah! I still can't believe it. A woman pinched her cheek as she stared at the holovid in her home. Her home was in one of the affluential neighborhoods of a rich district. It wasn't too rich but rich enough to be considered luxurious. As a level 7 telepath, the woman worked a safe and well-paying job in one of the large hospitals. For the first time ever, she took a leave for 2 days. It was to watch the entire expo. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. Misha told herself. Perhaps she was, but the emotional baggage inside her didn't care if the action was crazy or if she was crazy. Because this so-called gamma potion gave her hope. A hope that her only son won't become like her brother. Her brother used to be a happy and warm boy. She didn't remember when things changed. Perhaps it was after his awakening, but it wasn't a drastic change that she could vividly remember. It started slowly and subtly. By the time she noticed, it was already a norm. First, their parents commented on his progress speed. They increased his training speed. Apart from school, he spent nearly 6 hours practicing every day. His friends eventually alienated him as they grew further and further away from him. Then after a few more months, his girlfriend broke up with him. Misha remembered accidentally overhearing their conversation. Why? I love you. I'm serious. I will do my best to give. How many hours did we spend last week? How many dates did we go on? I'm spending every minute I can on practicing so that we can be happy in the future, and you'll say the same thing in the future. You are a good person, but I can't be with a guy who doesn't spend time with me. Misha could still vividly recall the apathy in the woman's tone and the despair in her brother's. She was only 13 back then and didn't know much about the complexity of the adult world. So, she initially thought her brother was in the wrong. But only after she grew up did she understand that her brother's girlfriend's real reason was something else. She simply looked down on him for his low talent. She also remembered what happened later that night. It was even more vivid. Her brother came home drunk, for the first time ever. And for that, he was severely punished by their parents. It was so severe that even she started crying. While she did, she saw something that probably was the single most impactful picture of all her life. His eyes. The light in their eyes dimmed and was replaced by a sense of desolation. He knew that being drunk was only an excuse. Ultimately, his parents too were disappointed in him. And from that day on, her brother went from a cheerful bright boy to a bundle of desolation and apathy. As she grew older, she tried to mend ties with him, but he rejected her thoroughly. By the time she graduated from the academy, he was abusing materials and was under serious issues. The last time she saw him was a year ago. Then, he seemed to have disappeared altogether. Misha couldn't find him. But she decided to keep him at an arm's length to prevent him from influencing her son. Like her brother, her son was also a low-talented individual. And the bullying already started. His friends alienated him. His girlfriend broke up with him a week ago. Even her husband started to scorn him. For Misha, it was the same story all over again. She was scared that one day, her son too would become like her brother. As a mother, there was nothing scarier than it. Unknowingly, she too started measuring things based on talent. If only he was born with a higher talent, then we'd have all been happy. My brother too, my parents were never happy after his incident. Ugh, is it my fault that he is born with such a low talent, or is it his fault? Her thoughts were erratic and she didn't quite know if she was being rational or condescending. But regardless of her own feelings, she was determined to prevent her son from following her brother's path. It's just that she didn't know how to do it. Then, this gamma potion came as if it was a rescue from heaven. The trials begin now. The host announced and the holovid showed a large stadium. In the midst of a huge spiral stadium were 5 floating arenas. The lowest floor had the 100 level 1 members and the highest had the 100 level 5 members. Even though it was pre-pawned, the spiral stadium was filled with people. At least 500,000 people were accommodated. Thanks to its large structure and advanced facilities, it wasn't big of a problem. Now, we'll first verify the combat powers of each individual. The host announced. Pop. With a large pop, 5 large vehicles entered the 5 arenas and dropped off, abyssals. Then, the abyssals, seemingly controlled by a telekinetic, floated to each one of the participants. The huge arena itself was divided into 100 small battle rings. Now, each battle ring had a participant and an abyssal. Yes. Kill them. Son of bitches. Chop them to pieces. The cheers filled with the stadium as everyone shouted for the most brutal killing of the abyssals. Just like how abyssals captured humans, humans also captured abyssals and used them for various purposes. Since they were rare and a military secret, no one thought they'd see their archenemy here. But while everyone was emotional, Varian squinted his eyes. Something is very wrong. The abyssal was too still. His eyes had no focus and were white. But just as Varian was about to make a move, those plain eyes turned blood red. A terrifying killing intent locked onto him, and at that instant, Varian understood that he was facing an abyssal brainwashed into a killing machine. Fuck. So, when faced with a peak level 4 abyssal, Varian tensed. The piercing feeling in the back of his neck didn't help. Hundreds of thousands of eyes in the stadium stared at the 5 floating stages. Their gazes were dispersed and at least a few thousand were looking at Varian. Every audience can directly swipe through the countless holograms and choose to watch the battle they liked. The same went for the billion viewers who were watching this test match beforehand. So, not only was Varian under the direct gaze of thousands of members, but he was also indirectly watched by millions. If it was the old him, he'd have felt tremendous pressure to perform well. But after experiencing Cluster City's conspiracy and Pluto's heist shortly after, Varian found his current situation more bearable. After all, those were grand events that might happen only once in a lifetime. He not only actively participated in them but was also a decisive factor. Compared to that, the current situation suddenly seemed like child's play. So, despite panicking a bit initially, Varian quickly calmed down. With a clear head, he assessed his current situation and decided to play it safe. I can't reveal my other powers. Even though systems sealed every other path if things go south. Arg. A loud scream from one of the nearby rings interrupted Varian's stream of thought. Varian took a quick glance at the abyssal. After they entered the dual ring, a transparent sphere covered them. The abyssal glared at Varian with bloodshot eyes and looked like he wanted to drink his blood. But he didn't attack. Only then did Varian understand that the abyssal was under the control of a telepath. Only when Varian starts his own attack would the abyssal be released and their fight would officially begin. Of course, he couldn't wait forever. There was a stopwatch floating on top of the dual ring. 9:45, 9:44, 9:43, once the time runs out, it'd be considered a defeat. But what happens to losers? No one knew. But they did know that all of them signed a form declaring that any injury or death in the match was their own doing and the Xander family holds no responsibility. Arg. Varian's thought process was interrupted by a loud scream. It was the same voice as earlier, but now, it was not only louder but filled with grief. It reminded him of his tragic cry. Varian turned to the source and his body froze in shock. In one of the dual rings, an abyssal was ripping apart an arm of a young man. Zip. Zap. Weak lightning sizzled around the young man's arms, but it failed to stop the abyssal's enormous physical strength. Humph. With a snort, the abyssal pulled the arm off. Splurt. Splurt. Due to the sheer force, blood started to splurt out of the young man's wound like a fountain as the screams filled with agony rose. Arg. Help. Save. Varian watched in an unnerving silence and so did the audience. They were happening across all levels and most of the views went to these situations. But contrary to expectations, the majority wasn't sympathizing with the injured testers. In fact, they were chanting like a frenzied mob. Kill or be killed. You guys got the opportunity to have the potions for free. But you can't even survive an abyssal. Pichui. You signed up for this. You competed against others for this. Stand up and fight. Varian let the system stealthily turn on the body path. Varian felt like the world suddenly went from 144p to 4K. He saw the audience sitting hundreds of meters away and he saw their faces clearly. Regardless of their age or gender, they were frantically looking at the participants in dangerous situations. Their eyes were glued to the screen and they chattered their teeth. Tightly gripping the seat, they were barely holding themselves from standing up and yelling. It was almost as if they were seeing one of their own in these participants. A family member that died, a friend that was killed, a colleague that was murdered. Varian sighed and had the system once again seal his body path. Ugh. Varian was forced to close his eyes and the next moment, the world was once again back to a low resolution along with equally poor senses. Gree. The abyssal roared at him, its eyes pulsing with green blood. 8:30, feeling the strong killing intent from his enemy a few feet away, Varian let out a light sigh. And with a flick, a blue light covered him. Boom. The abyssal shot at Varian. The battle had begun. The moment the abyssal moved, Varian's eyes couldn't keep up. But he wasn't relying on his vision. His water sense quickly showed that the abyssal was now directly above him and was about to punch his head. For a split second, Varian felt a deadly threat. As a level 4 water awakener, taking a direct hit from a level 4 body awakener, even if he was covered by a light water armor, was too risky. All said and done, his life won't be truly in danger. The system had a setting that lifted off the levels should his life truly be in danger. But his mind calmed him instantly. Die. The abyssal growled as his fist tore through the air and reached Varian's head in the blink of an eye. Zah! Varian created a layer of ice under his feet and with a quick push, skated out. Boom! The duel ring shook as the abyssal's punch nearly broke the stage. Varian almost fell on his face due to the imbalance and his lack of experience. So, he grew 2 ice spikes at the bottom of his shoes and with them, pierced into the floor. Schwa! And saved himself from falling. Die! The abyssal rushed at him swinging a punch. Varian used his ice shoes to dodge and waved his hand. Schwa! An ice arrow materialized and shot at the abyssal's eye. Whoosh! The air seemed to cool down wherever the arrow went. Varian's body flashed a soft blue light as he created 10 more ice arrows. I was always the one who was cornered. I wonder how it feels to corner a body awakener through elemental attacks. He wondered and waved his hand. Schwa! The ice arrows blocked off every retreat of the abyssal and forced him to confront them. Without giving him any more time to think, the arrows tried to pierce through his skull and rip him apart. But thanks to both his experience in body path and Varian's inexperience in water path, he was able to survive. 323, 320, 230. After trying for a long time, Varian realized that killing the abyssal this way was impossible. So, he switched tactics. Die. With a light kick on the floor, he shot at Varian like a bolt of lightning. As he reached Varian, there was a huge shit-eating grin on his face. What a stupid son of a bitch. Varian cursed inwardly and snapped his fingers. Whoosh! The arrows that were earlier stuck into the ground suddenly flashed and the ground under the abyssal was covered in ice. Wah! The abyssal was equally confused when the ice turned into water and wrapped him in a bubble before solidifying into ice again. MFFM. The abyssal's sound was muffled by the ice cocoon. He was frozen in midair. He was still midair and he was still lunging towards Varian, but he was frozen. The major reason for it was his own carelessness. The abyssal looked at the ice surrounding him and his eyes reddened. Gotcha! Cracks appeared on the ice and the next moment, it broke into pieces as if it never existed. Ha! The abyssal shouted in glee. You can't trap me. To his confusion, Varian seemed to have expected it as he simply shrugged. Whoosh! An ice spear thicker than any arrow he received was already waiting for him the moment he broke the ice cocoon. It pierced his neck and destroyed his head, ending his life. Winner, Reich. Reich? Oh, that's my pseudonym here, I totally forgot. Varian clicked his tongue at the hologram announcement. Lifting his body path restrictions, he glanced at the audience and found that they were all focusing on something else. Don't tell me. Varian's eyes widened as he hurriedly turned to the side. Splash. Splash. The moment he saw that scene, Varian's blood boiled as his eyes went red. Stop it already. He yelled but no one stopped it. The scene didn't change. An abyssal was sitting atop a bloodied body. Like a painter checking his masterpiece, he slowly broke the bones of the human underneath him one by one. First, the breaking of finger bones elicited painful but weak shrieks. Then the hand bones, then the arms, the ribs, the legs. Varian gritted his teeth at the gruesome butcher. The participant was still moving a finger, so he wasn't considered as fainted. An abyssal violently punched through the neck of a woman who fainted from blood loss. Boom! Like a tomato being squashed, the woman's neck burst into pieces as she died a horrible death. Why isn't anyone stopping? Varian glanced around and saw that at least 20 of the 100 level 4s were dead. Are humans really that cold-blooded? A chill ran down his spine and he looked at the audience. Woo! Somebody save them. My big brother, he's just like my big brother. He'll die. Save him please. Sister, don't shout. The risk of life is clearly mentioned in the terms and conditions. They won't stop it. The audience mostly had a face overcome by grief, guilt, and nostalgia. Some even tried to run to the floor and stop the matches forcefully. Unfortunately for them, the staff of the stadium swiftly stopped them. It didn't matter if you were a level 3 or a level 7, under the guidance of Sovereign Julius, everything went smoothly. 1 o'clock, 0:45, as the time trickled down to the last bits, Varian suddenly had a question. Out of the 100 participants, 10 died, and 75 had won. 15 were still fighting. Cling. Cling. The sharp sword blows were the most common sound. With each passing second, the injuries on the humans and abyssals that continued to fight worsened. 0:30, 0:15, as things neared an end, 3 died while 7 emerged victorious, albeit with heavy injuries. So, the statistics so far were, 1, 82 dead, 13 fighting, 5 total, 100, midnight. The stopwatch stopped and Varian held his breath without knowing why. The 5 human abyssals who were fighting until then stiffened. They're being frozen by a telepath. Varian noted the dimness in their eyes and wiped the sweat off his palms. But what is this nervous feeling? Boom! Under Varian's and the audience's incredulous gaze, the dueling ring of the 5 participants was blasted into pieces. After the horrifying sight, all that was left was charred bodies. The audience opened their mouth but words seemed to be stuck in their throat. Since the era they were living in wasn't peaceful, they were used to seeing such content on a daily basis. But even that didn't mean they were comfortable or even indifferent to such gruesome sights. Ah! A woman in the audience retched. Ah! Vom! More followed, but they were only a minority. The majority stared high into the sky, to the floating chairs, the seating of the most important guests including Sovereign Julius. They stared at it as if they wanted an answer. As if on cue, Sovereign Julius' voice resounded throughout the stadium. Being the Gamma Potions Expo participant wasn't just an opportunity, but also a risk. They know full well what they were signing up to. And let this serve as a harsh lesson to you. War doesn't care about morality. If you're weak, then you die. Just like these geniuses. So, get stronger. It's the only way. The audience was visibly shaken by his words. It seemed like a wake-up call for them. If they had to fight the abyssals in the future, would they be able to win? No one thought of lasting long enough for help to arrive. Sovereign Julius made it clear by blasting the participants who couldn't make it in time. In real life too, some battles had to be fought under a severe time constraints. If you can't win them, then you die. But how do I improve my strength? This question rose in everyone's minds as they frantically searched for the answers. And how do I improve sons, daughters, spouses, parents' strength? It only got more complicated from there and soon, the audience was wiping the sweat off their foreheads until one of them clapped and said, "Ha! Potion. Right. Yes. It's the best option we have." One by one, the audience calmed down from the agitation. The mysterious Gamma Potion was their one-stop solution. Not just them, even the people watching it online, they too had the same thoughts. I will pre-book them. I will sell my house, but I'll buy them. This is my gift to my son. Don't worry, son, your dad is rich. The whole world was affected by Julius' words, and that included everyone in the audience. Except for Varian. What a cheap guy. He is using their fear to get them to buy his product. A sense of disgust rose in Varian's mind as he despised Julius' actions. I need some evidence about the evils Xander committed. Does this fear-mongering tactic count? His train of thought was broken by an announcement that shook the stadium. Dear participants, here you go. The Gamma Potion. Down it immediately. Following those words, in front of every standing participant, a crystal white vial filled with blue liquid floated. Take it now. Varian took a deep breath and unscrewed the potion. Then without hesitation, he downed the potion. Will they advance right away? Shoo. It'll take time. Ha ha ha. I'm watching this with my own eyes. My daughter won't be bullied anymore. Ha ha ha. Heaven bless you all lucky bastards. Completed, the host of the expo announced. The audience could now see all the participants standing straight. Their faces were flushed as if they were drunk, and some of them were even waving in random directions with goofy grins, and uttering nonsense. Varian also followed them. He used his water path, condensed water inside him, and increased the blood flow to his cheeks. As a result, he looked drunker than anyone else present. Then, he drunkenly flipped a middle finger at the sky, where the so-called guests of honor were seated. Since every participant was behaving incomprehensibly, the audience was rather frightened about their condition and didn't take their actions too seriously. So, Varian was also spared from the charges under contempt of sovereign. Of course, no one knew that once he downed the potion, Varian isolated the liquid using his water powers. Then, temporarily unlocking the paths, he sealed the potion inside a layer of solid space and telekinetic power. It should last for a while. As he sighed in relief, he noticed that there was an eerie silence. Oops, was I found? As he prepared to instruct Boo, he noticed that the audience's gaze was filled not with suspicion but worry. Did the potions not work? He understood their feelings and glanced at his peers. What happened? Oh heavens. One by one, the participants turned sober. Seeing this, the audience also breathed a sigh of relief. The host announced right then. The participants will now be attached to a testing sensor. Following his words, 400 silver orbs shot onto the arenas and reached the participants. Varian raised his hand in reflex and the silver orb turned into a band around his left wrist. It glowed for a second and showed, Water Path Level 4 Peak, aha. A man in the audience exclaimed at the huge floating hologram that suddenly appeared in the stadium. It had 400 readings displayed in real time. The participants will be at rest for a day and you'll see the results by then. Their progress at any moment is displayed out for everyone to see. The host announced with a confident tone. The audience gasped in surprise. Only one day and results? Far above in the sky, the main guests of the expo started raining compliments on Julius. Only you can make such bold decisions, Sovereign Julius. Earth Branch's trade union chief said with an admiring gaze. Indeed. Results in one day? I think only you have the confidence and the abilities. A vassal family head praised eagerly. Julius simply noted. It's all thanks to Zadner's R&D team. Saying so, he glanced at Dr. Thomas. The mad scientist himself smiled at Julius with fear. Don't be too serious, Dr. Thomas. If you join our Xander family, your resources will only be higher than your current position. Not lower. Julius said with a confident expression. As Dr. Thomas was about to answer, a sudden sound cut him off and drew all attention. Cra. The sudden muffled sound from the level 1 arena drew gazes. A boy who was standing till then collapsed onto his butt and closed his eyes. A few minutes passed by in silence as everyone watched in anticipation. And then it came. Pop. With a small pop, the boy advanced to level 2. His aura was still incredibly chaotic and needed a significant amount of time to consolidate, but it already created a storm in the audience. Wow. Level 1 to level 2 so fast. I took 2 months. I took 4 months. Fucking half year. I took a year. I took 10 years. I am still a level 1. As the old man in their row coughed, the men and women arguing also stopped. Casting a sympathetic glance at the old man, they turned back to the arenas. Varian also glanced at the boy with interest, imitating the other participants. Level 1 to level 2 needs a potion? Pfft, he held back from laughing, but it was really funny how easy it had been. Now then, the testers are very tired. Let them have a day's rest. The host announced in a generous tone and waved his hand. The telekinetics in the staff got their signal and snapped their fingers. Like missiles taking off, the participants shot out from the arenas to their quarters. The host glanced at them and continued. Congratulations to all of you. Since you survived this test, all of your reasonable demands shall be fulfilled and of course, they would be shown to the public. You can live the next 24 hours without any stress. Then, you'll have another and final test. Varian didn't resist the mental force holding him up. Soon, he was back in his resting quarters. Inspecting the progress tracker closely, he asked in his mind. Boo, what's this? Boo's cute voice sounded. Progress tracker. Your location trackers. And, a self-denotation bomb in case you betray. Somehow, Varian wasn't surprised by the truth. He only found it rather unnerving and pitiful. Boo, can you do anything about this thing? Varian asked, pulling at the wristband. It's directly connected to a central server now. It's fully encrypted. Boo can't do much without breaking everything apart. Boo lamented. Fine. Varian sighed. He did have plans to train under Sarah for the remainder of the day. Reaching level 5 from peak level 4 was no small feat with her help, it'd be way easier. Of course, there was also a small wish to spend more time with her. Master, you need to reach level 5. You only have 24 hours. Come on. Boo urged in a loud voice. Wait, won't they hear? Varian signaled to the wristband and whispered. Boo patted its chest and said. They're not monitoring you. Boo knows that much because Boo is monitoring the quarters. Varian jumped straight into the bed and sprawled like a tired horse. Then he asked the system to temporarily unlock 2 paths and brought out the gamma potion from his body. It was spotless and uncontaminated, just like it was before he took it. Varian poured it into a vial and stored it away. Boo, remember, we might need this thing in the future. Leave it to me, Boo said and then muttered in confusion. What thing again? Advancement. As his eyelids turned heavy, Varian muttered. Oh yes, advancement thing. Master, don't sleep. Practice. You need to reach level 5 ASAP. Boo urged Varian. Fuck. Varian tossed around in bed and declared. If I stay up for 1 more hour, I'll go crazy. With a drowsy face, he commanded the room's AI. Wake me up after 8 hours. And just like that, he fell asleep, having to reach level 5 in 24 hours. Boo tried to wake him up a few times, but all of its efforts were silenced by the tyrant Varian. Bad master. Boo pouted as it floated above the bed. Looking at Varian's relaxed smile, it felt an impulse to change things. It liked when things remained the way they were. For instance, its master was always doing something. Boo pondered for a bit and tried to chuckle like one of the villains it recently watched. Mwahaha. Ghosts are never slaves. Zzz. Varian's subconscious seemed to have perceived the disturbance outside, so he involuntarily kicked a pillow at Boo. I was kidding. Master. Trust me. Boo jumped back into the ghost ring. Then after a minute, it peeked outside and saw Varian was still sleeping. So, it barged outside with a puffed-out chest and snorted. Huh? Who's scared? I ask you all, who's scared? Hearing no answer, Boo nodded while rubbing its chin. Exactly. Boo is too brave to feel an emotion such as fear. Boo just wanted to save that pillow. If it touched Boo, it'd have broken into pieces. Now then. After convincing itself of its bravery, Boo rubbed its hands and turned to the room's watch hologram. Before he went to sleep, Varian set an alarm. With a single thought, Boo hacked into the system and changed the time. Beep. 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 Boo waited eagerly for its master to wake up. It's not because I don't want to see master sleeping in daylight, which is shameful if it gets out. It's because I don't want Master to fail to reach level 5 by the deadline. Yep. Boo nodded, as if convincing itself. Beep. 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 The alarm continued to ring. Sia. Varian's eyes snapped as he shouted. Subconsciously, he broke the limits placed on his divine paths and ended up using his body path powers. Bang. Zap. The bed was broken into pieces while the furniture in the room was burnt to dust. Master. Boo stuttered with a trembling voice. But Varian didn't care. Sitting on the floor, he stared blankly into the distance. His hands involuntarily moved to his face and covered his eyes. He could see her. In the living room of their old home, they were on the couch, sitting side by side. He pinched her cheeks and grinned. Congrats, Sia. Sia, the captain. What's your team name going to be? Shadow Heroes? Or Starfighters? You know what? I'll make a list. Sia glanced at him blankly. Varian frowned and gave her a cheerful smile. Hey, what happened? You don't like the names, scrap them. I was just messing with the names. I am just very happy that you're now the class captain. I declined the captaincy, Sia said blankly. Varian's hands on her cheek stiffened and he looked at her with a look of disbelief. Sia. Varian tried to smile but failed miserably. He clenched his teeth and said slowly. Do you know how valuable this opportunity is? Sia nodded silently. You don't. If you can gain more credits, you can apply for a better academy. If you do exceptionally well, and I know you will, you can even get into the Imperial Defense Academy. So why? Varian held her hands as he stared into her eyes with an intense gaze. Sia lowered her head and bit her lip. I can't. Varian's chest heaved up and down as he felt like clutching his hair. If it was any other person, he'd have yelled, no, he'd have not cared at all. But Sia. Why Sia? Why are you throwing away your future? You know how happy Mom would be if you can get into the Imperial Academy? Varian asked with a bitter smile. Sia stiffened at his comments and fell silent for a few minutes before muttering. -5 months. Huh? Varian raised a brow. 15 months, Sia said again, this time with a clear voice. She took his hands holding her into his and said word by word. The captain should focus all their time on the school missions until graduation, that's 15 months. Varian opened his mouth to convince her, but Sia continued. All captains will have training in the school's main campus for 4 months. I can't contact you or Amanda for the 4 months. Her voice was low at the end, and he could sense reluctance. Varian tried to convince her, I can understand your reluctance. Everything will be so boring without you. But 4 months for your future is fair, it's not fair. Sia cut him off and looked at him with piercing eyes. You know it, don't you? Our school doesn't let anyone get into Imperial Academy for free. They showed me the contract. The goddamn contract means I have to work on another planet for 5 years after graduation. Varian turned his gaze away from her and sighed. This 4 months, I can bear. What about those 5 years? Sia's voice was threatening to break down at any moment. Varian said bitterly. Sia, you are the most talented in our class. Our family couldn't support you properly. Now you have an opportunity, you should grasp it. Your future will be bright. Bright? Sia shook her head. It's already bright, Varian. You don't have to feel sorry or guilty for me. I am doing this because I like to do it. For me, family comes first. Varian looked at her shining golden eyes and was at a loss for words. What was the emotion he was overflowing with right now? He didn't know. But he did know it wanted him to help her in any way he could. Unfortunately, he still hadn't awakened. Varian was snapped out of his thoughts as he felt a soft embrace cover him. Don't think too much. We all have our dreams, don't we? This is my dream. I want to be there for my family. Sia rested her head on his chest and whispered. As you wish. Varian finally compromised and hugged her back. After a long time, Sia raised her head and glanced at him silently. He had fallen asleep, but maintained his posture. In fact, he didn't even move an inch. It was as if he didn't want to disturb her. Sia gently caressed his cheeks and whispered. You don't know how much you mean to me. The world started to spin and everything went blank. Master? 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 Huh? Master? Varian was woken up by a white ghost clinging to his body. Boo looked at him with an anxious gaze and asked. Master, those dreams again? Yeah. Varian nodded lightly and noticed the condition of the room. Wait, why did I do that? He squinted at Boo. Ha ha ha, Boo rubbed the back of its head and answered. The alarm. Yes, the alarm went off. That's why. You subconsciously panicked. Varian raised a brow and retrieved his calm from the invisible ghost ring on his finger. What? Boo cursed inwardly and hurried to action. When Varian checked the time, it was exactly the new time that Boo set. Now, do you believe me, Master? Boo asked slowly. Boo, oh, Boo. You are very clever but also very dumb. There are only 3 messages from Sarah. So, only 3 hours passed. Varian said and stood up. Wait, what? Boo found this incomprehensible. Someone needs to pay for their actions. Varian clenched his fists and walked towards Boo with a smile so evil that Boo would claim even the villains it watched paled next to him. Ghost Boo, it's time for you to pay. No. As for his reason, I am feeling the itch to beat the fucking crap out of everything. The guards who were registering the request looked at him with a speechless gaze and nodded at themselves. It must be one of the many small side effects of the potion. Of course, they didn't know for certain. But they didn't really care enough to dig deeper. Alright, we'll give you a peak level 4 abyssal of the water path. The taller guard of the two nodded. A dozen. Pardon? I need at least a dozen, please. Varian pressed on with a smile. The guard's eyes widened at his words. This guy is crazy. They both felt. They once again nodded at themselves. It must be one of the many small side effects of the potion. Seeing where the conversation was heading, Varian added. Of course, I will beat them in a safe environment. The guards' firm expressions loosened, but they still weren't convinced. Or will you be the reason for my failure to reach level 5? I'm pretty sure the higher-ups would rather be dead than fail. He said with narrowed eyes. Why you? We were caring about your safety. The guard glared at Varian and snarled. Yes. If you want to die that much, die. The other guard sneered and tapped his comm. After a few minutes, Varian was taken to a large black room with a huge cage. The cage, made of special metals inscribed with intricate carvings, held a dozen abyssals. The security system is running. But you can still die. The guard said reluctantly before slamming the door shut. I guess he is not a bad person after all. Varian shrugged and changed the settings of the training room. The surveillance in the room was turned off and the transparent glass walls of the room turned opaque. Cling. With the sound of metal clinking, the cage opened. Gree. Kill. Pests. The 12 abyssals surrounded him instantly. Varian looked at the eager expressions on their faces and clicked his tongue. Someone can't wait for their death. Shwa. A pillar of water materialized and shot at them. Hours passed and soon, it was time for the final test of the Gamma Expo. The participants arrived at the floating arenas even earlier than the audience. There was a bright smile on their faces. It was as if they won the world. Did you feel it? Yes. I'm no longer weak. They said I can never reach level 7, haha. I'll prove them wrong. The participants started discussing one by one. Only Varian was an oddball. He neither smiled like them nor did he approach anyone for conversation or entertain any conversation. "Brother, did you fail?" a level 2 girl asked after a while. Varian simply smiled at her and she asked no more. And in the following hour, the audience filled the stadium once again. The thin man with a white beard, the host, appeared once again as he floated outside the arenas. Staring at the audience, he started. "Now you all must be wondering about the results, right?" The audience nodded dumbly. "Ha ha ha. Why don't we fight out through a practical test?" Even though he said so, the ghost snapped his fingers and the hologram displaying every participant's level popped up. Hiss. "No way. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Pinch me, someone pink, ouch, you bastard. I can't believe it. Slap me, someone slap em, smack." A loud thud rang throughout the stadium and a woman clutched her cheek in dumbfounded silence as she stared at the guy next to her. "Ah, sorry. I really can't help myself from helping people." He smiled, seemingly in embarrassment. "Now then, please inform me if you need more." The guy continued and the woman nodded vigorously. "Kyle, don't overdo it. I mean, she's annoying as fuck." The guy and the girl next to him exchanged their glances before focusing back on the arenas. They came to witness what could only be described as a revolutionary breakthrough in modern science. If their prof knew, he wouldn't be happy since they basically sneaked out. After Varian reconciled them last time, they were both trying to spend some time together and they ended up here. Gamma potion. Kyle frowned. Alpha, beta, gamma, so, is this the third version? Or the third best version? The final test is in front of us. The host's words reverberated across the stadium. With a snap of his fingers, a group of impoverished, poorly dressed individuals with bloodshot eyes appeared in the arena. They looked like they hadn't had a meal, a bath, or even a second of rest for weeks. However, just like the Abyssals yesterday, these people too couldn't move. Initially, people thought they were heinous criminals, but the host was quick to clear that misunderstanding. These are the relatives of Shadow Guardians, their helpers, and even some of the Shadow Guardians we captured outside their bases recently. What? Varian's hair stood up as his blood boiled. The audience's reaction was the opposite. Any trace of sympathy they had was gone and all that was left were gazes of hatred. Seeing that the right tone was set, the host smiled and glanced at the participants. "The final trial is simple. You picked one of these traitors suiting your level and kill them. You kill, you win. You are killed, then haha." Following the host's words, a wave of silence followed. The participants were understandably nervous about facing these so-called terrorists. After all, a major reason all of them had no problem facing Abyssals was that the creatures faced Heaven's will while on Earth. So, when they fought them yesterday, they were actually fighting weaker Abyssals. But these people, the terrorists, won't have any disadvantage. I'll do it. Let me be the first. A voice called out, drawing gazes to itself. It was Varian. Misha stared at the holovid blankly as she recognized the participant's opponent. Brother. The brother that was missing for a year, was in a torn shirt and ragged pants. As he gazed at the participant, his chest heaved up and down as if he was burning with hatred. Yet, he couldn't move an inch. You reached level 5? She muttered in shock. But with his talent, it was impossible. As she wondered, the fight had already begun. Boom! It was neither fancy nor expected. It was a one-sided battle from the start. Water Path level 5, 0/2000, each of Varian strikes, water columns that could cut down boulders, ice arrows that could freeze lakes, or spikes that could pierce even tough metals, landed with dangerous precision. His opponent, though very strong, was simply not a match. Soon, Varian's upper hand was clear. Ka! The Shadow Guardian was blown away and rolled to the ground. Varian raised his hand and clenched his fist. Paw! A huge water hand appeared and slapped him to the ground. The Shadow Guardian coughed out blood and found that he couldn't fight back anymore. Paw! 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 With each attack from Varian, the Shadow Guardian's injuries worsened bit by bit. In the end, he was covered in a puddle of blood. Varian looked back at the audience and as if fireworks exploded, they all cheered at him. Yes! Kill, do it! Varian walked to his opponent step by step and the Shadow Guardian weakly raised his head to look at Varian. Watching the match far away, Misha closed her eyes as she awaited the inevitable helplessly. Schwa! The sound of a sharp object cutting the wind caused her to shiver and tears dripped down her cheeks. Ting! Then came the sound of metal clashing with a blunt surface. Huh! Misha opened her eyes in confusion and gawked at the screen. Huh! Everyone in the audience and even the host stared at Varian in shock. His sword penetrated the area right next to the Shadow Guardian's neck. Participant Reich, what do you mean by this? The host asked coldly. Are you perhaps trying to defy the contract? I suggest you rethink, for the fate of that is far worse than death. Of course, you guys went out of your way to insert all the hidden clauses. Varian snickered inwardly, but on the outside, he maintained a solemn expression. Raising up the injured Shadow Guardian, he pointed the bloodied man to the audience and yelled. I don't want to kill him. A tense silence filled the stadium. Even the participants that were about to start their match stopped in their tracks. Julius looked down at the participant with interest. Those words were enough to kill him. But he was willing to listen today. Like others, he also thought that Varian was a sympathizer of the terrorists. Death isn't enough for these traitors. Varian's words caught everyone by surprise. But he didn't seem to care as he continued with a face distorted in hate and a voice filled with venom. The traitors that betray their own race should be tortured. Death is too light for them. Since they want to support another race against us, the best revenge against them is to show them what they are going to miss. Show them how powerful we grow while they remain inside a dark room they can never come out of. Let them rot there for years, decades, and let them go crazy. Varian's words caused everyone in the audience to nod fervently. Even the higher-ups considered his words in a favorable light. Not a bad suggestion actually. Moreover, they're useful alive. Julius tapped his seat and mused. His interest in this guy increased. I want them to suffer. Varian's voice rose by another octave before falling abruptly. My sister was killed by them. Death is too light for them. His final words seemed to hit the nail in the coffin as some of the audience started crying. Yes. Torture them please. We can't let them off too lightly. Yes, we general public are no longer ignorant. Lord Sovereign. Sovereign. One by one, they all chanted his name, and Varian too looked up at the floating seats high up in the sky with seemingly eager eyes. Julius looked down at everyone and finally, his voice reverberated across the arena. As you wish. Cheers erupted in the arena as the audience was overcome by joy. I humbly thank you, Sovereign Julius, Varian said with a seemingly reverent gaze. Inwardly, he sighed in relief that he was able to save lives. For now at least. I am optimistic about your future. Work hard, young man. Julius nodded at Varian and went silent again. The host waited for a few minutes after their exchange was over before he announced. So, according to the changed rules, you don't need to kill them. Just incapacitate them and you'll pass. And thus, the matches started one by one. Thank you very much. Misha kneeled towards the screen that showed Varian. Regardless of his reasons, her brother was alive. Yes, this was the guy who nearly beat her brother to death. But if not for him, he'd be dead for sure. I'll save you, brother. Misha was going to do her best to get him bail and prove his innocence. It wasn't just her, but hundreds of people who saw their relatives and loved ones in the Shadow Guardians prostrated to Varian as they thanked him from the bottom of their hearts. Ha! Varian yawned lightly, as he watched the last match with visible disinterest. Of the 400 participants, 350 survived while 50 died. While the participants were told not to kill, it didn't mean the Shadow Guardians wouldn't go for the kill. And the final watch, Scriv wins. The audience clapped lightly, but they too were bored by this point. So, he glanced at them with a smirk and continued. Now, without a delay, let's start the prize ceremony. Varian's brows tensed, but he controlled his breath and showed no abnormalities. We pick one winner from each level based on their final battle. The host announced, and Varian involuntarily stiffened. Even though saving the Shadow Guardian was one of the reasons he was so high profile, another reason was to win this prize. First impressions were truly impactful. So, he exploited it to the fullest and gave his best in the fight. The audience waited in anticipation for the host to announce names. But the man simply chuckled and snapped his fingers. Whoosh! 5 figures shot out of the arenas and instantly reached the floating seating, where the most important guests, including Sovereign Julius, were seated. In mid-air, a blue light flashed on them, cleaning them off from all their blood and sweat. By the time they reached the floating lounge, they were prim and proper. It was definitely a High Awakener butler's work. And not just one, but a bunch of them. Water Awakeners cleaned him off, telekinetics arranged his clothes, and so on. While Varian tried to distract himself from his own situation, he couldn't ignore it any longer. Holy shit. He raised his head and saw the man who stood at the very top of the solar system. Sovereign Julius. A/N 500 chapters. Thank you very much for your support, love, laughing face. Update, no need for gifts anymore. Congrats and thank you everyone. We've reached top 25. Yay! Old message, PS, on the last day of the month, we're at rank 26, trending, monthly. Just one step from the 25. If you can, please give us the final boost. Enigma scrolled through the titles and narrowed her eyes. Shadow Guardians, torture over death, general public happy over the participant's suggestion being accepted. Says it would decrease any such future organizations. Xander scientists promise to find the best ways to mentally break an individual. Crack. The glass table in front of the couch she was sitting on was blown to pieces. The audacity. Enigma muttered with killing intent. Well, at least they don't have to die. Blue Flash sighed deeply. The original test was to kill them, but Varian changed their fate. Enigma finished off her sentence. How do you know it's him? His disguise is changing every time. Blue Flash chuckled and passed a hologram showing a young man with an ordinary face bearing no resemblance with Varian's beating up the Shadow Guardian. Enigma fell silent for a moment before answering. I just know. I won't even question you. Blue Flash waved her hand helplessly and continued. I don't know why he is doing this, but every social media platform now is flooded with these messages. And I'm pretty sure he is pushing them with some agenda. Enigma nodded. He knows what he is doing. Can trust him on that. Blue Flash shrugged and the hologram shifted to play Varian facing Julius. Their eye contact was more than usual. While normal people thought it was a sign of Julius' approval for Varian, Blue Flash could only wipe the sweat off her forehead. Fuck, he really has nerves of steel. Scratch that. He has balls of durasium. She declared. Enigma silently stared at Julius and Varian. Her eyes didn't fluctuate, but Blue Flash knew that she wasn't as calm as she looked. Are you worried about him? I don't care, Enigma answered with her characteristic monotonous tone. Oh, then do we abandon the plan so that he die? Blue Flash was abruptly shut up by Enigma's glare. I still can't get used to your glare. Blue Flash thought as their spaceship sneaked into the demon abyss. But she cooled down and started laughing. You glare at me for him, but don't admit that you care if he dies? Ha ha ha. Shut up. Ha 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 MFF. The spaceship finally entered the demon abyss under their weird banter. Varian stared at the legend of a man and his greatest enemy at an arm's length. Despite being in his 60s, he looked to be only in his 20s. With a large build, curly golden hair, and a handsome face, people would only think he was handsome, not a psychopathic murdered who needed to be purged out of existence. But Varian knew better. So, he vowed to kill this bastard one day. Not just kill, but destroy him as a whole. Including his Xander family. While he thought so inwardly, Varian maintained a cordial attitude on the outside. He smiled at the guests, praised them from time to time as the 5 winners had a light talk with the VIPs. And while doing so, he already found his target. With a white coat over casuals, a lanky man with unkempt hair and a haggard face stood in contrast to other dignified VIPs. Thomas. Varian muttered inwardly and glanced at the rest of the people in the floating low. There were a total of 10 VIP guests, including Julius and Thomas. Except for Thomas, the rest were level 9 with the exception of Julius. Now, the awards ceremony begins. Prizes were delivered to the guests who gestured to the winners. The VIPs presented gifts to each winner one by one. First, it was a young boy in level 2. Then, it was level 3. Varian felt his anxiety boil as he barely kept his cool. Enigma, you must time this properly. He held his breath as level 4 also received his prize. Then came his turn. Reich. Varian stepped forward and with a bright face, received the gifts one by one while thanking VIP guests. The last 2 guests were Julius and Thomas. You're thinking, I like it. Julius patted his shoulder and nodded lightly. Thank you so much, Sovereign. Varian retched inwardly, but on the outside, he put on an admiring face. Julius didn't seem surprised as he waved his hand. Varian sighed in relief and reached Dr. Thomas. Since this was a VIP lounge and with Sovereign Julius himself present, Dr. Thomas's bodyguards weren't allowed here. But with these 9 monsters, I can't kidnap him, so, click. An alarm rang in the comms of every VIP guest. Enigma is near. One of them claimed and without any hesitation, dashed out. The rest followed, but faster than them all was a golden light. Julius used his artifact space ring and quickly teleported to a dungeon 100 miles away. His keen senses already caught a presence in the dungeon. Enigma cross-tunneled? He exclaimed, but soon his eyes were filled with killing intent. You're going to die today. With a wave of his hand, the entire dungeon started to shake violently. In the blink of an eye, he reached the location. But right then, space fluctuated and the presence disappeared. Only then did Julius understand that they once again cross-tunneled. Wait, why would she do it? Fuck. Julius' eyes widened as he realized a possibility. His senses already caught the 8 presences outside, they were all here. That meant, no one was present on the stage. Humph. Even though it might seem like a lot of time went by, not even a second passed, that was how fast sovereigns were. So, Julius immediately used his space ring artifact and teleported back to the stadium. But since he was in a hurry, he ended up landing outside the stadium. His superhuman senses first noted the chaos of the general public before they saw the level 5 winner, the guy who elicited his interest still in a handshake with Dr. Thomas. But more than that, Julius was able to sense a space fluctuation coming from Reich, no, from Dreamer. But neither the Dreamer or Dr. Thomas noticed him yet. Their reaction speed was simply not enough. Die. Julius tapped into space and it broke like a mirror. Gotcha. The space cracks extended in line all the way until they reached Dreamer's face in the blink of an eye. But right then, the space fluctuation around Dreamer, which was strangely unaffected, pulled him in along with Dr. Thomas. However, before it did, the space crack finally reached Dreamer's face. It was just contact for a tiny fraction of a second, but the disguise mask on Dreamer's face broke apart completely, revealing his real face before he was dragged into the ghost ship. If it was anyone else, even if it was any level 9, including Bali, they would have totally missed it. Unfortunately, Julius wasn't a level 9. He was a sovereign and arguably, the strongest sovereign. So, he clearly saw that face before it vanished. That face, he remembered that face from the solar trial. Varian? But since the time was slow, it skipped to the final moments. First, when Varian shook hands with Dr. Thomas, the detector rang. Then, everyone on the stage dashed to the dungeon at the highest speed. Dr. Thomas panicked, and his bodyguards were about to arrive at the stage to protect him. But Varian exploited that moment and asked Boo to pull them in. However, right when he was about to go in, the world shook and his mask broke off. He couldn't even sense the attack, much less predict it. He didn't even blink his eyes, but Julius had already gone to the dungeon and come back. To Varian, it was almost as if Julius had never disappeared, to begin with. Master! Master! Boo's screams snapped him out of his trance. Varian didn't even think before unleashing his telepath powers on the man in his hands. And Dr. Thomas couldn't even utter a word before he fainted. Boom! But Varian couldn't even sigh in relief as the ghost ship started to shake violently. He crashed against the wall and broke a few bones. Ugh! Raising his head, he glanced at the hologram depicting the outside. A huge golden giant raised its fist and punched against a tiny spaceship. Boom! Varian felt the world spin as he crashed from one edge of the wall to another and coughed out blood. Boo, go! He muttered in a weak tone. Dreamer! Julius' loud roar reverberated for hundreds of miles. As he stomped his foot, the ground shook violently. The air seemed to stand still. And then, he grabbed for the ghost ship. Boom! 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 The High Awakeners raised their head and widened their eyes. The blue sky seemed to be broken as pitch-black cracks of space spread everywhere. Crisscross black lines filled the sky as if they were net. The huge Titan arm stretched through these space distortions and reached Ghost Ship. Whoosh! At the last moment, Ghost Ship barely dodged. Humph! With a snort, the Golden Titan slapped the ship with the back of his hand. Boom! Like an asteroid crashing down to Earth, a ghost ship crashed down to Earth. Julius' figure disappeared and he appeared 100 miles away. You and everyone related to you will die, he said with a chilling voice as he locked onto Ghost Ship that was heading towards him. But at the last moment, Ghost Ship changed course and rose into the sky. Julius narrowed his eyes and swung his arm. Gotcha! Ghost Ship accelerated at the last moment and he only managed to gaze at the end of Ghost Ship. Due to the sheer force, even the highly defensive walls of Ghost Ship broke apart at the back. But using the momentum, Ghost Ship shot into the distance. Humph! Julius rose into the sky and caught up in less than a moment before trying to grab it once again. Whoosh! Ghost Ship once again accelerated at the last moment and escaped. Boom! 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 The space broke down like glass as Julius tried to catch Ghost Ship again and again. He had all the advantages. Yet, he couldn't catch it. It was as if you were trying to catch a slippery fish with bare hands. But even though he couldn't catch it, Julius' attacks landed on Ghost Ship without fail. Gotcha! Gotcha! Cracks began to appear on the formerly pristine Ghost Ship. And as Julius expected, it struggled to escape from his grabs. How long can you keep this up? Julius sneered and declared. You better come out and accept death. I'll spare your loved ones. Or else. Boom! Ghost Ship was punched and like a broken rag doll, shot into the distance. The metal from Ghost Ship fell from the sky as if announcing its end. Julius' lips curled up as he once again appeared at Ghost Ship's location and reached out. Or else, everyone related to you, your family, your friends, everyone will face the consequences. Ghost Ship escaped again, he slapped it in irritation. Gotcha! Julius sneered as its pieces continued to fall from the sky. In a few seconds, Ghost Ship would lose all resistance. He infused the prana into his artifact, Space Ring, and was about to teleport to its location when his smile suddenly froze. Ghost Ship slipped into a dungeon, the same dungeon Enigma previously appeared in. It didn't seem to be an accident. Even though Ghost Ship sustained a lot of damage, every step seemed to be calculated for this step. And that's why it directly entered the dungeon with such precision. Damn it! Julius cursed and tried to teleport directly into the dungeon. Shoo! But he only teleported to the entrance. Dungeons were a different space and he couldn't just teleport his way in. Arg! Julius roared as he rushed into the entrance. The guards at the entrance were blown away by his momentum and the sheer shockwaves killed them. It wasn't just them, however, everything in the vicinity of dozens of miles was in tatters. Varian! Julius finally shouted once he reached the dungeon. His superhuman senses discovered the Ghost Ship. It was on fire, emitting smoke, and seemed to be on the verge of exploding. The final attack really did a number on it. Julius finally sighed in relief but didn't relax. He immediately transversed hundreds of miles and reached the Ghost Ship's position. Finally, he reached out and grabbed at the Ghost Ship. Huh! The Ghost Ship tried to evade like earlier, but it was too damaged to pull it off. Thus, Ghost Ship was finally in the hands of Sovereign Julius. They are faster than you, stronger than you, and more perceptive. It's a futile effort. An endeavor bound to fail. A guaranteed death wish. But Varian planned that very thing. That's why, he once again requested Sovereign Irene for the Space Stones, and got Blue Flash to acquire CTFs for their usage. Then, he asked them to enter Demon Abyss and CTF to the dungeon closest to the stadium. He calculated that Julius would quickly return, but in his opinion, the time would be sufficient. He and Blue Flash extensively studied all the footage, secret and public, on Julius' combat and concluded that it was mostly safe. But they didn't consider the fact that Julius could have gotten stronger. At the Sovereign level, even that slight increase changed the entire dynamics of the plan. So, as he lay down in a pool of blood, Varian found himself hearing Julius' menacing words. But Varian didn't lay in despair. He retrieved an item from his storage ring and a light started to envelop him. Varian? What secret are you hiding? I'll dig it out one by one. Julius smiled and his giant titan form shrunk to 5 meters. He tightly held the Ghost Ship that tried to escape and began to tear it. Caw! With a creaking sound, the top of the Ghost Ship began to break. Narcissus died because of you. What do you think I should do? Julius asked in a chilly voice. And Sia, do you even remember her? Besides this guest ship, that'll be your greatest value. You'll be the bait for me to lure her out. Caw! The Ghost Ship's top was forcibly opened and Julius finally saw the young man who shook the solar system. You still dare to smile? Julius was taken aback by that nasty smile. He had an ominous premonition and hurried to grab Varian. But a bright light enveloped him and the Ghost Ship as space twisted violently. Once Julius realized what Varian was trying to do, he didn't hesitate and directly punched out. Boom! With a loud boom, the space exploded and then, the Ghost Ship was gone. He faced my punch head-on. He's dead. Julius told himself, but what Varian did at the final moment was etched in his mind. He flipped a middle finger at him. It's a pity I couldn't get his corpse for the lab. Julius had one regret. He had no doubts about Varian's fate. There's no way he could survive a sovereign punch head-on. HAA. Varian gasped and breathed in violently as he woke up in a white room. We escaped. The CTF took us away in the last second. Boo appeared in front of him and sighed. Varian clutched his head and tried to recall what happened before he fainted. Suddenly, his eyes widened and he turned to Boo. The punch. Julius attacked him. Here. Boo cut him off and waved its hand. Whoosh. 3 walls with huge dents appeared in front of Varian. These were the sovereign-level walls. Did you forget, Master? You asked Boo to keep them around you all the time, just in case. Boo patted its chest in relief. Thank you, Boo. Varian sighed in gratitude. Haha, what are you saying? Boo blushed a bit and turned away. An awkward silence filled the room. Varian confirmed that his condition was fine and was about to step out of the room. Master. Boo appeared in front of him and blocked him. What? Varian titled his head. There is. Boo tried to come up with something but finally hung its head. Varian had an ominous feeling as he stepped out of the room. What? The sight of the ghost ship's interior devastated him. Broken walls, sparks of electricity, twisting of space. As he recalled the pristine and elegant feel it always had, Varian felt a pain in his heart. He looked at Boo's crestfallen face and apologized. I'm really sorry, Boo. For others, it was only a spaceship. But for Boo, it was its body, its home, its everything. So, this damage not only hurt it physically but also emotionally. Even though he was with Boo for 2 months, Varian never thought of Boo as a machine. To him, Boo was as human as any person. In fact, Varian never really associated the term human with one's race. His attitude towards Enigma didn't change after knowing her race. To him, what a person aspired for and worked towards was more important than their inherent and immutable elements of identity. So, he'd give up a million Shadow Order humans for one Boo without thinking. Boo suddenly started crying. Crystal blue tears fell out of the white ghost's eyes and Varian was suddenly at a loss. Boo! Varian called out softly. His head was still a bit dizzy from the injuries and his body was still not completely fine. So, with each step he took, he staggered and stumbled, but he kept walking and reached Boo. He raised his hand and lightly patted Boo, and his hand passed right through Boo. Master, it really hurts. Boo whimpered. Boo feels like a part of Boo is broken. Varian's eyes were filled with killing intent as he promised. Boo, I'll take revenge. Boo stopped crying and stared at his face. In the end, it nodded weakly. Then it said, Master, Boo will try to fix the injuries. Varian nodded stiffly when he heard the word injuries. Walking into a room, he first checked whether his messages reached Enigma. Only after confirming it did he sigh in relief. Then, he called up the holograms and checked the situation of the ghost ship. He saw a ghost ship teleporting into the demon abyss. Since they didn't have Enigma, Abyssals didn't know they arrived. And despite the injuries, Boo was still capable of stealth. So, the ghost ship cautiously escaped the demon abyssa and landed on an asteroid in a remote region. Varian swiped the hologram and observed the exterior of the ghost ship. He saw Boo's reluctant expression as it retrieved all the backup materials, metals, circuits, and special formation components and used them to fix the damages sustained by the ghost ship. Boo's face was filled with pain and with each fix, it seemed to recall the injuries. But with equal determination, Boo continued on. The broken metal defenses, the AI systems, the formations, the stealth components, everything was slowly being fixed. My little ghost is working hard. How can I slack off? Varian took a breath and walked out. But he was offering to help voluntarily. You are still injured, Boo said slowly. So? Varian raised a brow and said in a tone that allowed no refusal. I want to help. Let's get going. Boo opened its mouth but no words came out. In the end, it finally nodded with a smile. Good. Then Master, use your telekinetic power to hold these at an angle of 35.6 degrees to the wall. Boo said. Wait, what? Varian opened his mouth and wanted to protest, but in the end, he forced a smile. Well, just a bit difficult. He'd be fine, right? While you're at it, apply the exact lightning to heat the metal to 1200 Celsius. Varian's smile stiffened and he wondered if he was treated like a humanoid thermometer. Oh, and once the wall starts cooling, use your water powers too. Enough. Varian cut off Boo and panted. One by one, please. Thus, the man and the ghost started one of the most bizarre repairs ever. After a few hours of work, Varian collapsed on the asteroid as he blankly stared into space. Fuck, this is more exhausting than escaping from Julius. Well, now Boo feels more complete, though Boo is still far from its peak. Boo also collapsed beside him as it said in a complaining tone. Varian spread his mind sense and carefully checked the ghost ship. He said in surprise. Boo, you are really back to normal. I was really scared about your injuries. Thank heavens. Boo fell silent, causing Varian to turn to it. Boo? The injuries, the damage would have slowly killed Boo. Even if the ghost ship survived, Boo won't. Thankfully, there were spare parts. Boo said in a low voice. Were? Varian caught the keyword. Do you mean you don't have any more? Boo looked into his eyes and shook its head. All are over. Minor injuries are fixable, but anything of this scale or even close it'll be the end. Varian stared at Boo with a complicated expression. That was Boo's life insurance. And it was gone, just like that. He didn't know why he was holding his breath, but the heavy weight on his chest told Varian that the news hit him harder than he thought. Boo feels better now. Boo smiled cheerfully before it frowned. But Boo is really angry at that bastard sovereign. No need to respect that scum, Varian said and wanted to pat Boo, but his sore arm proved to be too much of a challenge. In the end, he just smiled instead. Well, that bastard sovereign, Boo wants to kill him. Boo blinked innocently and said in a threatening tone. Varian snickered. Get in line. There's me, Enigma, and Sia who want his head. Woo, master, bully. Boo looked at him with pitiful eyes. Cough, cough. Varian coughed and shifted the topic. I confirm that the emergency messages are sent, can you double-check? Boo squinted its eyes at him. For some reason, it felt that something was off. But it couldn't point it out. Messages to Enigma, right? They're received, no problem. Oh, then I'm going in. We'll meet them up once they're done. Varian said and teleported right into his bed. Boo stared at the location he was laying down blankly before exclaiming. You diverted the topic. In Julius' memory, Varian's assassination was a recent event. After the solar banquet, he was informed that Eric talked to Varian about a girl called Sia, and after a bit of digging up, he learned that Varian and Sia were relatives. While he didn't understand how Varian was able to retain Sia's memories after Creo, sovereign of Psychic Path, himself erased those memories, he convinced Creo to kill Varian. And according to the reports, when he was assassinated, his space shuttle was indeed destroyed and he died. But since the destruction was too much, not even his ashes remained. But since he is the dreamer, it makes sense that he escaped, Julius muttered as he tapped his study table. Instead of cherishing his life, he tried to kidnap Thomas in my presence. Should I say he's reckless, ignorant, or crazy? Julius shook his head and stopped thinking any further. Whatever Varian was, it didn't matter now. He's dead. The ghost ship should also be destroyed or, since they disappeared like CTF, they might have gone to Demon Abyss. That's a sure way to being found by the Abyssals. Damn. The technology will be used against us. Julius clenched his fists. Maybe the technology is shared with his close ones. He narrowed his eyes and tapped his capture everyone related to Varian. Julius was a ruthless man. He despised kindness to the bone. So, he had no qualms in his order. As the de facto ruler of Earth, his influence was unimaginable. He got every bit of information available in a few minutes. Since there was a possibility of getting the ghost ship's technology, Julius personally supervised the mission. Surprisingly, there were only 5 people on the list close to Varian. Sarah, daughter of Evander, Kyle, son of a media reporter, Maya, daughter of the famous scientist Haru, Seth, former instructor at Defense Academy. Currently missing, likely dead. Gareth, former adventurer. Master of Leon Training Hall. Sarah. Julius' eyes narrowed and he considered the possibility before shaking his head. Going head-to-head with Albert right now was too risky. Seth was also unavailable. Kyle, Maya, and Gareth. Julius tapped his comm and ordered. I want them in 5 minutes. Yes, sir. Julius leaned back in his chair and patiently waited. While he did, he recalled Enigma's escape and clenched his fists. If you hadn't taken away Sia, I'd have also gotten the talent boost like Charles. Damn you, bitch. But you're truly in a pitiful position, aren't you? Being chased like a street dog across the solar system. Wait. Julius suddenly exclaimed. If Ghost Ship is with Varian, then how the hell was Enigma escaping the patrols all this time? The patrol ships, the level 9s, the pursuing teams, no spaceship could keep escaping from them. Of course, except for their Sovereign-class spaceships. But Julius didn't think any Sovereign would actually give them away. Not even Irene. These spaceships were just too precious. So, the only logical conclusion should be that Enigma was also using a ghost ship or something similar. Julius' chest heaved up and down as his breath turned ragged. Dreamer must have given her that. So, maybe he also gave them to his close ones? Realizing just what he could get, Julius tapped his table impatiently while keeping an eye on the comm tin. Yes? Where are they? Julius picked up the call before it could even ring properly and asked. Sir, they are all missing. What? Sarah, Kyle, Maya, Gareth, take them away. When she read this message, Enigma and Blue Flash were in the demon abyss. Cross-tunnel formation could work from dungeon to dungeon. So, they could have CTF to another dungeon on Earth. But that'd have been stupid since the whole Earth was under Julius' hands. Thus, Enigma decided to teleport to the demon abyss. And once they were in the abyss, they quickly escaped. In fact, Enigma first entered the demon abyss, CTF to the dungeon, and then CTF'd back to the demon abyss. Logically, the abyssals should have detected her when she was near the abyss or at least in the abyss. Then, even if she escaped to a dungeon, they should have been on heavy guard. Escaping should have been impossible. But Enigma decided to bear the pain once again and forcibly suppressed the tracker. Thus, when they first entered the demon abyss, the abyssals didn't know her exact location. Then, Enigma already CTF'd to Earth Dungeon, then returned and dashed out of the abyss. By the time her suppression wore off and the tracker started functioning, they were already away from the most dangerous region. But like every other time, Enigma paid a bitter price for suppressing the tracker. I can't bear to see you like this. Blue Flash sighed at Enigma laying on a bed. Her aura was chaotic and blood spilled out of her mouth from time to time. Enigma looked like a patient that was about to die any second. She looked frail. It was the complete opposite of her. How is he? Enigma tried to raise her hand, but it fell down midway. Blue Flash caught her hand and patted her lightly. He should be fine. Even though she said that Blue Flash had an ominous premonition in her heart. Something with how quickly Julius appeared in the dungeon didn't add up. He was faster. While planning, they didn't consider this. No, I considered his speed being slightly higher than reported, but this is even higher. Will he die? Enigma's weak voice snapped Blue Flash out of her thoughts. No. He'll be fine. Blue Flash assured with a confident smile. As an Athena group agent, she could fool almost anyone with that smile. Unfortunately, not Enigma. She was able to discern Blue Flash's true intentions. Is he dead? Enigma muttered with a blank gaze as she faced the ceiling. There was sorrow in her voice, but more than sorrow, there was overwhelming guilt. Blue Flash bit her lip and closed her eyes. Her rational mind was telling her that he won't survive. It was all over. She suppressed the growing sadness and tried to focus on the future. Enigma's future. Humanity's future. Just a few hours ago, the future seemed bright and certain. Varian's presence, his actions, and his accomplishments, somehow convinced her that the future was in his hand and it was in safe hands. But now, Blue Flash found that she felt a sense of uncertainty and dread towards the future. The energy, the spirit, and the confidence Varian brought with him were no more. I hope he rests in peace," she muttered in sadness. Enigma's eyes started to glow as she pondered a decision. The same decision she was about to take at death's door. "I will fall into a sleep I might never wake up from, but in return, I can avenge him and also have Sia safe." Ting. As the thought started to consolidate in her mind, her comm suddenly rang. Enigma didn't know where she got the energy from, but she managed to sit up and tap on the comm. "Sarah, Kyle, Maya, Gareth, take them away." Before Enigma could be happy that he was alive, she shuddered at the message. "What did he say?" Blue Flash asked with a face glowing with joy. To her, as long as he was alive, everything else would be fine. Enigma wanted to move her hand to show the comm, but she collapsed. Blue Flash supported her and gently placed her on the bed. "He is alive. Now, any news is good." Blue Flash stopped abruptly as she read the message. Her eyes widened as sweat began to drip down her forehead. With a pale face, she looked at Enigma and managed to speak. His identity is revealed. He's captured." Her shoulders dropped as she felt all strength leaving her body. Enigma was of a different opinion. Having been proven wrong time and time again, Enigma chose to believe he'd be fine. Ting. As expected, another message arrived after a few seconds. "This is Boo. We barely escaped. Master fainted from serious injuries. He asked me to check whether the previous message is sent to you." "Ha." Blue Flash breathed in relief. Her pale face turned ruddy and full of energy. Enigma's eyes also glowed brightly as she rested the irreversible thought in her mind. Inadvertently, Solar System had just escaped a tectonic shift twice with Enigma not making that choice. He's alive. Phew. He really worried me." Blue Flash spoke in a blaming tone, but anyone could see the joy on her face. Enigma wanted to sit up, but feeling the growing weakness in her body, she directly said, I can't help him now. Please fulfill his request." "Of course." Blue Flash patted her chest confidently. "I can get them away easily. We're not on Earth, just barely an hour from Demon Abyss." Enigma reminded. "Don't worry. An Athena agent can do this much." Blue Flash smirked and was about to continue when her comm rang. Her face glowed in surprise, and after reading the message, she said to Enigma, "Boo sent me the addresses of their comms and has also blocked everyone else from tracking them." Enigma sighed in relief after hearing that. Blue Flash tapped her comm and ordered her loyal subordinates. "Secure a few people." With these two factors combined, despite the stadium starting to collapse, no one died. After all, even the most normal person here was a level 3 awakener. Soon, Sovereign Julius disappeared from everyone's vision, but the shockwaves continued. The emergency plan was carried out and the hundreds of thousands of crowd were quickly being evacuated. "Hey! Is that Dreamer?" A girl gasped as she held her boyfriend's hand and advanced in a line. "Shoo!" The boy covered her mouth and teleported them away. Her words drew attention and people actually looked at the sound source. But seeing no one was present, the people gave up looking. Since it was a tense situation, they were let off easily. Otherwise, they might have been in trouble. The girl understood her mistake and nodded with an embarrassed face. The couple lined up again and quickly reached the exit, and after a simple check, the guards let them out. Like many others, they were also appalled by the damage to the Northern Utopia district. The place where beautiful floating buildings previously stood was now reduced to rubbles. That area is hit by the shockwaves. The boy frowned. And lives are lost in that area. If not for the barrier and level 9s helping us, we too would have died. His gaze turned sharp as he looked back at the grand stadium that continued to crumble. Seeing the panicked faces of the crowd rushing out, the boy felt as if he was watching a new side of the world. He attacked right in the stadium without caring about us. The boy clenched his fists at the harsh realization. Fortunately, the stage was high above, and the attacks were blocked by the barrier. If not. The boy looked at his girlfriend and fear gripped his heart. So, he gripped her hand tighter and pulled her closer. "Hey!" the girl exclaimed. "We will get out now. Then, we can talk," he said, and taking the emergency road, they reached the exit of Utopia District. From the large parking section just outside, their hovercar dashed towards them. Arg! A loud roar came from far, but it caused the couple to freeze instinctively. "Ha! What was that?" the boy exclaimed and forced himself to enter the car and pulled her in. Whoosh! Along with hundreds of thousands of other hover cars, they too left the danger zone and moved towards a safe city. "Ha! We're finally safe." The boy sighed and looked at the girl. She had a confused expression as she kept tapping her comm. The anxiety was visible on her face as she smashed the comm. "What happened?" "It's not working. I need to inform my dad or he'd be worried." The girl sighed and tried to use her comm once again. The boy looked at it once and noticed a strange difference. His eyes widened and he said, "Hacked." "Huh? Hacked? Who? How? Why?" The girl opened her mouth in confusion. "I don't know, but we should keep moving." The boy's expression turned serious. "Throw it off." Saying so, he checked his comm and after confirming it was also hacked, threw it off. The girl followed suit. The couple traveled for a few hundred miles and finally stopped by a desolate coast. The girl finally took out her mask, revealing a cute face. The boy did the same and revealed a handsome face with blue eyes. "We used fake IDs, thankfully," Maya muttered before pouting. "But my comm, who would hack it?" Kyle rubbed his chin. "The academy? Maybe they found that we sneaked out." Maya rolled her eyes. "I was joking." Kyle coughed and his expression turned serious. "This is a big issue. Someone might be trying to find us." "You're right." A gentle voice appeared out of nowhere, causing both Kyle and Maya to stiffen. "You." Kyle pulled Maya behind him and faced the woman in all black. Even though she showed no power, Kyle knew he had no chance of winning. Just the sheer pressure the woman gave off by being there was too strong for him. "Who are you? What do you want?" Despite the fear, he didn't back down and asked with a straight face. "Me, did you forget what this dress code entails?" the woman asked in a melancholic tone. Kyle looked at her black clothes again before his eyes narrowed. "Guardians." "Yes. And my deputy leader wants to meet you," the woman said. "I refuse," Kyle said with a fierce expression. He didn't even seem to fear death as he bravely stared into the woman's eyes. "I'm afraid I can't take no for an answer. This is the order from our deputy head." The woman stressed the word deputy head with a rueful smile. She too knew that the organization itself existed in name only. The titles such as head and deputy head lost all value. Yet, the stubborn spirit in her refused to give up. So, here she was. "Nope, I can die but I won." Kyle's roar was cut off by a soft but determined voice. "It's fine." Maya poked her head from behind and nodded. "Maya?" Kyle turned back and gawked at her. Maya raised her hand and revealed another comm with a light swipe. The woman saw the file Maya sent her. "Oh well, that was unexpected." The woman covered her mouth and chuckled. "They will ensure our safety." Maya looked at Kyle's questioning eyes and answered. And how are you sure? Have they brainwashed you? Kyle's brows knit together. Maya shook her head bitterly and said. I am sure because of the things I know, but you don't. Don't worry, you will soon know it all. What are you talking about? Kyle was only getting more confused. Since she was the one who asked you to be brought over, perhaps she thinks you're ready. Maya patted him lightly. All right guys, get into the ship. The woman said and showed them a sleek spaceship. Kyle looked at Maya's firm eyes and a premonition rose in his heart. With a sigh, he followed them in. Whoosh! The trio's spaceship broke the atmosphere and launched towards a special region. Along with them, another spaceship also rose and headed in the same direction. Maya too wiped the tears off the corner of her eyes and sniffed. We have to live on for them. Even though Kyle refused to make sense of those words, his brain did. It told him exactly what Maya's actions meant. But he refused that possibility. It was too much for him. Perhaps there were other possibilities. Maybe this woman was Maya's relative. Even though the excuse sounded far-fetched, it was better than the other option. As he waited in silence, their spaceship finally stopped. It was a rather desolate asteroid, likely a hollowed-out one from extensive mining in the 4th century. But Kyle's attention was hooked by the spaceship that was already present on the asteroid. The two spaceships moved next to each other and opened a passage. Let's go. The woman said and took the lead. Kyle took a deep breath and walked through the passageway. Hiss. The first thing that entered his sight was a sleek black room. The walls, the chair, the table, everything was pure black. Kyle felt a jolt of fear for a moment but controlled himself. I already came this far. Plus, Maya said. Deputy Head, he's here. The woman said and bowed lightly. Only then did Kyle focus on the person. No, he couldn't see the person. He could only see the back of the chair. However, Kyle felt tremendous pressure coming from that chair. The longer he stared at the chair, the more labored his breathing turned, and in the end, he gasped for air and finally turned away. Ha! 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 As Kyle drew in short, sharp breaths, he heard a voice. But since he was not in the right state, he didn't hear it properly. I will contact you if the need arises. Thank you for your help. It's my duty. The woman who brought them here responded, and even in Kyle's weak sense, he clearly felt her leave. Now in this meeting room of this spaceship, there were only the three of them. Kyle held Maya's hand and nodded at her. Don't worry. They'll have to cross me before they can touch you. He wanted to convey courage, but Maya simply giggled and said. Are you still going to scare him? Ha ha ha. With a burst of laughter, the chair turned around, revealing a beautiful woman with sky blue eyes and soft blue hair. Kyle's eyes widened as he exclaimed "Mom." Allison covered her mouth and chuckled. With a wink, she asked. How was your date? Kyle was speechless at her response. He even ignored that she somehow knew about their secret date and asked. You're the deputy leader? How? Why? Aren't you a news reporter? Kyle asked with an expression full of disbelief. Maya clearly saw the existential crisis on his face and patted her forehead. Welp, I'm indeed a news reporter in my CV. Allison shrugged and propped her chin on her hand as she said. But most of the time, I'm Blue Flash. With a blue flash, she was covered in black clothes from head to toe. This. Kyle opened and closed his mouth. He thought this could very well be a prank. But the aura he was feeling from his mother reminded him of the spillover aura from the level 9s in the stadium. I can't believe this. Kyle shook his head violently. Am I in an illusion right now? Have the telepaths caught us? Kyle. I won't believe your words. Nev, Kyle. The familiar yell shut him up. Even though Allison wasn't at home for most of the time, Kyle had childhood memories, traumas of this yell, it meant he was about to be disciplined. How many times did I tell you? You must be mentally resilient. Allison slammed the desk and said with a disappointed tone. Maya tried hard to control her facial expression. Even Iron Man will be shocked at this news and you expect him to stay composed. Mom, Kyle tried to speak but found himself short of words. Why did you become Blue Flash? Grow more influential and I'll tell you. Allison gave him a smile. Influential? Kyle frowned. He was already the #1 student in his academy. He asked with genuine confusion. How influential? Allison's eyes flashed as she recalled Varian's multiple talks with Sovereign Irene. Despite trying her best not to, she ended up comparing them. He's a monster while my son is my son. No one should be ever told to replicate what Varian did. I won't ask Kyle either, but... Allison told herself that she wasn't an unreasonable mom, so she reduced the difficulty. If you can have a private phone call with any sovereign for 1 minute, then I will consider you influential. Kyle opened his mouth in shock. Are you crazy? Oh, and it should be the sovereign who should have called you. You should end the call after 1 minute citing you were busy. Allison added with a serious expression. When they were planning once, Irene Nile did call Varian and the exact thing happened. As Allison returned from her daydreaming, she found that both Kyle and Maya were staring at her with pity. What? Mom, I'll take you for a checkup. Kyle said with a regretful expression. I'm really sorry, because of me, you have gone crass, and oh. Allison jumped onto her feet at his remark. I just asked you to get a private call. Why? Realizing how outrageous her demand was, Allison paused abruptly and sat back down. I was just kidding. She said, perfectly maintaining a poker face. Yeah. Kyle could only accept. It's all your fault, Varian. Allison threw Varian under the bus. After all, if he wasn't so excellent, she wouldn't set unrealistic standards for her son. And when did Maya join Shadow Guardians? Kyle suddenly asked, catching the two women off guard. Maya looked at him with a complicated gaze. After my mother died in Pluto, I wanted revenge. And I found them. I see. Kyle patted her lightly on the shoulder. Ahem. With a light cough, Kyle removed his hand from Maya's shoulder and looked at Allison with a tense expression. You aren't inventing world-class weapons but are flirting. Humph. Allison commented, once again comparing him with Varian. Now, even Maya rolled her eyes at Allison's words. If he can do that now, by his old age, he'll be creating weapons to kill sovereigns. Ha ha ha. Listening to her laughter, the couple looked at each other. Kyle still had a lot of questions to ask and most importantly, he wanted to digest what he just learned. As he was about to announce his departure, Allison said. Your next question is why I revealed all of this now. Why I brought you all the way here, far away from Space Patrol. Kyle shook his head weakly. If he asked why she'd once again give out an absurd condition. I don't want to know anything, just let me res. As he was about to leave, Allison dropped the bomb. Dreamer asked me to save you and oh, Varian is Dreamer by the way. Wait, what? Kyle was almost having a heart stroke. Why are you that excited? Maya's lips trembled and she found it hard to speak coherently. The plot. Kyle turned back to his mother and asked with a serious face. Varian is alive? And he is the Dreamer? Pretty much, Allison said in a nonchalant tone. But how did he survive the assassination? Wait, if he's the Dreamer, then he definitely could, Kyle muttered in realization. Just why didn't you tell me earlier? I almost thought he was dead. He demanded. Allison just shrugged with a helpless expression. Trust me, I didn't know until recently. Do you really expect me to trust your statement? Kyle glared at her but seeing her expression, he gave up. His past experiences told him that his mother wouldn't do what she didn't want to. Confronting her was useless. He held Maya's shoulders and shook her lightly. Ah. Maya snapped out of her trance and looked at Allison with an excited expression. So, Varian led you to Pluto? And the recent CTFs are to escape from Julius, right? Arg. I should have guessed from the coordinates. But I really helped in the first successful expedition against Pluto. Yay! Maya covered her flushed cheeks as she exclaimed in visible joy. While Kyle felt that she looked cute, her words nearly caused him another cardiac arrest. Pluto. CTF? MOM. Kyle stared into her eyes and demanded with the most serious he could muster. If it was any other person, they'd have stared away from such intense eyes. But Allison merely stared into his blue eyes with hers nonchalantly and even complimented him. Intimidation, not bad. Kyle wanted to deny, but he quickly shook his head. Don't divert the topic. Tell me what happened already. Sigh. Blue Flash sighed and looked outside. Kyle followed and saw a fleet of spaceships on the radar. Fuck, ouch. He was slapped on his head before he could even curse. Language, Allison said lightly and tapped her calm. The asteroid they were present on shook violently and Kyle was nearly floored as the spaceship took off. Whoosh. Boom. 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 The patrol ships opened fire without hesitation and the whole space seemed to be filled with fireworks. This continued for a few minutes until the pursuers were off the radar and were no longer a problem. What was that? Kyle clutched his chest and asked. A routine patrol fleet, Allison answered casually. Don't worry about it. There is a bunch of level 9 and level 8 chasing us. Kyle wanted to cry. Ha ha ha. Allison ruffled his hair after seeing his expression and said. Alright, I'll tell you about Pluto. Maya also perked her ears and listened carefully. After a few minutes, Kyle stared blankly into space. Hey. Varian is so brave. I contributed to the mission as well. Maya cheered from the side. If not for you, we'd have failed. CTFs are terribly important. Allison said with a grateful tone. It still needs a lot of fixes. Their words didn't register in Kyle's mind. He just blankly stared and stared. It didn't make any sense. His mother was the deputy head of Shadow Guardians. His girlfriend apparently joined the organization quite a while ago and was also working on a product called CTF. More shocking than both of these was the fact that his best friend was the hero. And he? Is my entire life a lie? Kyle sighed as he gazed outside. Kyle. Yes? He replied weakly. Julius found Varian's identity. Your lives are in danger. So, it's better to stay low for now. She said in a firm tone. Don't think too much about it. Things will settle down soon. I understand. Kyle nodded. I'll be going out. Vari Dreamer and I have a mission. Allison was already in all black, the regular blue Flash uniform. Then this spaceship? Kyle's lips twitched. There were fucking level 9s after this spaceship. In case of emergency, he'd be of no help. Don't worry about it. We are not the only ones on this ship. Blue Flash said and teleported to the exit. Wait, who else is there? Kyle shouted, but Blue Flash was already gone. Kyle and Maya looked at each other stupidly. Then Maya pointed out a door to what seemed like the control room. Right. Kyle walked to the door and knocked. Hello? Hello? I just want to know what we can and can't do. Can you give us some info, please? Kyle asked politely. There was no response. Knock. Knock. Hello? Hello? After a few minutes of knocking, Kyle shrugged and slumped on a couch. He looked at Maya, who was similarly slumped beside him, and said with a complicated expression. I didn't expect this. Maya looked into his eyes and sighed. I wanted to tell you initially, but your mom insisted. Some secrets must be kept. Kyle waved his hand and said in a low tone. But I've been thinking, every one of you is pursuing your dream and progressing towards it. While I feel like I haven't lived a proper life at all. Maya was taken aback by his words. Then, she stroked his head lightly. I believe in you. So, believe in me that believes in you. Kyle smiled warmly but was honestly confused. As he was about to respond, the spaceship suddenly stopped. Ouch! Kyle and Maya rolled on the couch due to the sudden stop. Hey! Kyle yelled in protest at the control room. As expected, there was no response. Pathway being deployed, whoosh. With a light creaking sound, a cylindrical pathway extended out of the spaceship. Kyle and Maya walked to the entrance with curiosity. Someone else was joining them. Swish. As the door opened, Sarah found two people in the room. Where is Varian? She asked with an urgent expression. He is safe. The control room's door opened and Enigma walked out. Sarah and Enigma's gazes clashed. Those three words appeared in her mind as she gazed into Enigma's tricolor eyes. They shone with an emotion she didn't understand but recognized as something not positive. Enigma. Sarah narrowed her eyes. She read about Shadow Guardians multiple times and was curious about their legendary leader. But never did she expect to see her in current conditions. Enigma was no longer the legendary leader of a glorious organization, she was the branded terrorist of an extinct group. Where is he? Sarah asked with noticeable anxiety. She couldn't care less about Enigma or the two people here. She received a warning signal from Boo, followed the instructions, and sneaked out to this location. Master's identity is revealed. We barely escaped. You are in danger. Sneak out and reach these coordinates. Varian is safe. His position should be hidden. Thank you, but your concerns are not needed. Enigma said curtly. Huh? Sarah raised a brow. Even though Enigma's voice was emotionless, her words and her tone were provocative. Do you have a problem with me? She asked in a neutral tone. Since Varian was helping Enigma, she didn't want an antagonistic relationship with her. But that didn't mean she'd take any disrespect. Problem? I do have a problem. Enigma walked to Sarah. Kyle and Maya looked at each other. Wisely, the smart people decided not to meddle and sat farthest from them. But Kyle went a step further and tried to contact Varian. Your talent, your achievements, whatever you have today is because of her kindness, Enigma said in a cold voice. Sarah's eyes widened. That day, Sia helped her and that improved her talent. It was an irrefutable truth and Sarah was indebted to Sia. But more than debt, she wanted to see her best friend. How is Sia? Can I see her? Sarah asked with a joyful face. Anyone could hear the eagerness in her voice. There was also a trace of loneliness in it. Even if Sia didn't improve her talent, Sia was important to her. It all started a year ago. Sarah hoped her relationship with Evander would go back to normal if she got into the academy. So, she worked extra hard and was the first ranker in the entrance test that year. She even undertook great risks and broke a record. All she got for that was a good job. But she didn't see his joy or pride. All she saw was indifference in those eyes. It had a devastating impact on her. As the days rolled on, it only worsened and before she knew it, Sarah reeled into depression. She was lonely, depressed, and gloomy. During that time, a girl was quickly making a name for herself in the academy. She was the entire opposite of her, social, optimistic, and cheerful. It was as if she was a bundle of positive energy that made everyone happy. I wish I was like her. Sarah had once wished. She thought life would go on, but on a fateful day, she went to a quiet park in the academy which usually had no visitors. That day, however, she decided to stay a bit late. Then she saw the optimistic, positive bundle of energy of the academy, Sia sitting near a pond and crying. In her helpless tears, Sarah saw herself. When she approached her, Sia was visibly shocked. But soon, they found great common grounds. Sarah learned that Sia had a tragic past, but decided to live strongly so that she could achieve a goal. It was always his dream to see a world of peace. He worked harder than anyone I know. But because of me, he gave up on his dreams. He lost all his confidence. I have no excuses. I am responsible for his plight. But I don't want to wash away my sin. I will become the sovereign he wished to be and bring peace. Once I do that, even if I die the next second, I'll be happy. When she confided her reason, Sia's usually bright face was filled with a myriad of complex emotions. Sarah didn't ask exactly why or what happened. But she understood that the burden on Sia was far greater than on her. So, when she saw Sia facing her life with such a brave attitude, she too decided to do the same. While she couldn't be optimistic or cheerful like Sia, she did succeed in her own way. She focused on practice, she turned proactive in her life affairs, and she chased after her goal, acknowledgement by Evander. Their relationship only solidified further when they joined together as Team Sayara. When their and other teams risked finishing a secret realm in the mid-dungeon, she was heavily injured. Everyone escaped except for Sia. Sia fought the magic beast and killed it at the expense of heavy injuries. But Sarah had fatal injuries. By then, they had already expended all the healing potions and the other teams ran away. Thus, Sia made a decision she never considered. Sarah still remembered that moment vividly. A drop of glowing blood fell from Sia's forehead onto her and it changed her forever. Sarah would never forget Sia's kindness. And that's why, please. How is she? I really want to meet her. Sarah said in a pleading tone. I don't know how one can be so shameless. Enigma said in a piercing voice. You steal the one person closest to her and you want to meet her? With what face? Sarah's face paled and she clenched her fists. Her worst fears came true. Even though Varian said his relationship with Sia didn't seem to involve any romantic feelings, she was scared it was indeed a romantic relationship from the beginning. Perhaps it was because of the way Varian could be oblivious to romantic feelings, even when she showed interest in him without knowing, he was unaware of it. But more importantly, Sarah could remember the smile and affection Sia showed whenever she talked about that person. It was such a close bonding that it went beyond any normal relationship. And that's why, when Varian revealed that he was that person of Sia, she panicked. Her insecurities exploded and Sarah struggled to remain calm. When Varian told her that he'd remain busy, she realized he'd be on a dangerous journey in the future. So, she set aside her insecurities and worked on herself. Even though Varian told her that she could call him anytime, she never called him once. She didn't want to distract him in the middle of his mission, whatever it may be. She only wished that in the not-so-distant future, they could stand side by side, face the dangers bravely and live a happy life. But if her happiness gave Sia grief, then I didn't steal him. I never about his relationship with Sia. If I did, this would have never happened. Sarah bit her lip and closed her eyes. Heh. Enigma sneered. Now that you know, why don't you back off? This way, you wouldn't be betraying Sia. Sarah thought of her relationship with Sia, everything they went through. Without Sia, she'd have never grown out of her depression. Without Sia, she'd have died in a desolate dungeon. Without Sia, Tears began to form in the corner of Sarah's eyes. The guilt became a weight that suffocated her. If she did give up on Varian, then Sia would be happy. Her relationship with Sia would be also guilt-free. It could also be considered as returning the favor. Sarah loosened her clenched fists and the weight on her shoulders seemed to have vanished with the painful decision. She looked at Enigma and said, I will not leave him. Sarah stared into Enigma's eyes fearlessly. Enigma raised her hand and Sarah braced herself. In the end, Enigma lowered her hand and said. Don't you want your father to be happy? I can give him a miracle potion and he will advance to sovereign. Sarah opened her mouth in shock. She'd have called it a bluff had it been anyone else. But Enigma, she was closely related to Sia, and since Sia could improve her talent, Enigma's words didn't sound impossible. If so, then a potion that could let her father fulfill his wish. Sarah's breathing turned heavy. Of course, it has a price. Leave Varian. Enigma said bluntly. Sarah glared at her and asked through gritted teeth. I am willing to pay another reasonable price. Enigma snorted and crossed her arms. Your father's happiness or your happiness, you pick yours. Sarah was frozen by her words. She couldn't find a response. Not one she could convince herself with. Enigma was right. She was choosing her own happiness over her father's. Sarah felt a bleakness rising in her. She felt like a criminal being judged. If she considered how much her father sacrificed for her, then her decision was indeed terrible. But even if she felt terrible and guilty, leaving Varian was too much for her. She couldn't do it. So, she took a deep breath and said firmly. I will not leave Varian, but I will also do my best to help my father. I don't need your help. Why don't you just listen? Enigma's voice raised and she said in a tone bordering between hostility and frustration. In fact, she clenched her fists tightly and was shaking in anger. You should be the one to listen. Varian's voice sounded, surprising everyone in the spaceship. The next moment, a hologram materialized in front of Enigma. Varian said with a stern expression. Enigma, whatever is happening, is between me, Sia and Sarah. We don't need your interference. Boom. Varian's words seemed to have poked a painful spot as Enigma's aura exploded. If it's about Sia, it's also about me. She is afraid of hurting you, not me. Enigma froze in the middle of her words as she realized Sarah and Varian rushed to the corner of the room. Sarah. Cover them with your aura, please. Varian said anxiously. On it, Sarah replied and covered the bleeding couple with a water shield. Enigma's pressure was beyond their ability to bear. So, the two began to bleed profusely, and if not for Varian's swift action, they would have gone into a coma. Is there any emergency room? Varian asked, his anxiety more subdued but still present. I have healing pods. Sarah retrieved 2 healing pods from her storage ring and placed the 2 inside. She lightly patted Varian's shoulder, though, her hand passed through since he was a hologram. Don't worry. It was only minor injuries. They'll wake up in a few minutes. Varian sighed in relief. He looked at Sarah and smiled heartily. Thank you. Is this how you thank me? By abruptly asking me to get into a spaceship? Sarah asked playfully. Varian scratched his cheek. Haha. I'm just messing with you. Thank heavens you are safe. She sighed deeply. Varian was about to sigh in relief when she suddenly glared at him. Now what? You keep me anxious all the time. Last time, it was Valos. Yesterday, it was the water path. And today, you fricking kidnapped a guy under the eyes of a sovereign. Just how big are your guts? Sarah raised her arms and exclaimed at this madness. Thanks, I guess. Varian smiled, a bit embarrassed. But he was indeed proud of his guts. I'm not praising you. Sarah gritted her teeth. It really sounded like one. Varian justified himself. He didn't even sound like he was lying. Sarah wanted to cough out blood. She was called one of the greatest geniuses. But this guy was something different altogether. Well, Varian was about to say something but stopped himself. Wait. Sarah caught onto his action and narrowed her eyes. You're going to do something crazy next, right? Ahahaha. Varian laughed nervously while his sweat trickled down his back. I knew it. Sarah exclaimed in exasperation and turned away. Sarah. It isn't that dangerous, it's just, don't. Sarah raised her hand and stopped him from continuing. I'm not asking for details. I'm only asking you to take care of yourself. Varian fell silent at her words and finally smiled. Then the couple fell into another banter, turning the once desolate spaceship lively. Enigma watched all this silently as she slowly felt a complicated emotion rise in her. She looked at the healing pods and bit her lip. I'm sorry. She muttered in a low voice and walked into a private room. Closing the door shut, she collapsed on the floor as her hand traced the glass wall of the room. Why do I always end up hurting everyone? Grief welled inside her as she closed her eyes in pain. Kyle and Maya had nothing to do with this. Yet, if she went just a bit more out of control, their lives would have been in danger. Not just them, even Sarah would be in danger. She couldn't imagine Varian's reaction if that happened. He risked his life for her and her organization, and she almost killed his friends and girlfriend. My emotions always hurt others. I don't need them. Like always, she once again used her mind powers to suppress them. But it wasn't easy this time. For some reason, how she behaved with Sarah continued to replay in her mind. And then came Varian's blunt remarks. Enigma, whatever is happening, is between me, Sia and Sarah. We don't need your interference. Enigma's tricolors dimmed and reverted back to their original violet. Blankly, she stared into outer space. Yes, I'm an outsider. She muttered weakly. It seems that you have to fight for him yourself, sorry, Sia.